Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, I'm Justice, and I do reviews on horror movies. Today, this is just going to be a compilation of my previous videos I did for Final Destination. I'm going to keep this intro very short and sweet, but if you haven't seen these videos yet, I figured I would compile them all here so you can hear all my thoughts on each individual film, or just make it easier for you guys to view in the future. But anyways, with that little spiel out of the way, I hope you guys re-enjoy my videos or enjoy them for the first time, but talk to you guys later. The first Final Destination came out in the year 2000 and was written by Jeffrey Reddick for X-Files before he was convinced by a New Line Cinema colleague to turn it into an entire film. The only thing they asked of him when rewriting the script was to change the lead characters from adults to teenagers due to the effects of Scream at the time on the genre. And this is my first video, but I can already tell you guys in future videos that there's going to be a lot of talk about how much Scream affected the genre, because it completely changed horror to the mid-90s all the way through the 2000s, so be prepared to hear that a lot. After the initial rewrite, James Wan was brought on to direct and did some rewrites, and was quoted as saying, "We want to do for planes and air travel what Jaws did for swimming." They didn't want to do another slasher movie. Been there, done that. And they wanted to do something new to add to the genre. They wanted people to be excited about the thrills leading up to the kills versus the actual kills themselves. Those were just a cherry on top to the tension that was built up to even if the character died or not. And that's something that they have been able to do continuously throughout this franchise. Honestly, where they've been able to make us afraid of things that we never knew that we were afraid of before. They were also excited about the fact that the kills were more commonplace items. Like, even in this first film, you have little things like Valerie Luton with her coffee mug and setting it on the counter, a crack forming in it, and then a trail of vodka forming around the room before suddenly it's on fire. They were more excited about doing something like that than having another Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees running around with a butcher knife. The fact that these everyday objects were being used against everyday people seemed more terrifying to them than a killer wearing a mask. Fun fact that I found while researching this that I didn't know previously, they wanted to have Kirsten Dunst and Tobey Maguire play the respective roles of Claire and Alex in the film instead of Devon Sawa and Ali Larter, but they changed the plans for unknown reasons, and the two ended up starring together anyways only a couple years later in the Spider-Man movie of the time. Larter was coming off of House on Haunted Hill at the time, and I didn't see much of why they came to her for the script or what the casting process was for her. But she does talk vigorously also about how she enjoyed that it wasn't just another slasher killer coming at her in the franchise. Now, Devon Sawa, on the other hand, and hence the t-shirt that I'm wearing, was just getting off of Idle Hands a couple years earlier, and the directors saw the script of that and thought that he would be perfect for the main role of Alex in the film. Another two of our team leads in the film was Sean William Scott and Kerr Smith, and Sean William Scott was noted as talking to the director and trying to convince them that he could be a dork, and I thought that was funny because even hearing it and seeing him in the film, I love him in this movie, but he does not look like a dork to me. I just see him as Stifler in American Pie.
Boy, I think I was just being myself. I was like, dude, I'm such a dork. It didn't take long. I think at first, like, you're right. You remembered, because it was the same producers as American Pie that did Final Destination, and I think you're right. They probably saw that character like, doesn't seem like Billy Hitchcock. And then he probably spent 2 minutes with me. He's like, he's good. He's good. He's a dork. Definitely a dork. You're hired, buddy.
I love how well he bounces off of Kerr Smith, and the vice versa, that Kerr Smith was currently in Dawson's Creek at the time. And then I saw another interview where Kerr Smith was talking about the opposite effect of what happened with Sean William Scott playing a dorky character. He was trying to play something different so he wasn't typecasted as the nice guy for his role that he played on Dawson's Creek. I won't get into that much because that show was before my time and I don't really know teen dramas that well unless they came out in the 2010s. So there's that.
Listen, it was a big detachment for you, wasn't it? Obviously you play Jack, who's, whilst being quite ripped, is quite a sensitive character on Dawson's Creek.
Ripped, yeah. Sweet.
But here, you're a real bully. Did you embrace almost being the bad guy of the film?
Loved it. That's why, I mean, aside from the fact that it was a great story, the character of Carter is, you know, the antithesis of Jack McPhee, and I wanted to get as far away from that as possible. You know, because when you're on a TV series, you run that risk of being stereotyped. So I think it's very important to choose a different character every time.
Well, this is it, because you watch it, and yeah, within the first 5 minutes, we're all just like, oh, he's playing the bad guy, which you must love. But of course, you know, knowing your character from Dawson's Creek, we all want you not to be like exactly the same guy, but you know, to be the nice guy, and that obviously didn't happen.
Yeah. Can you imagine Jack getting out of the chair, trying to beat the hell out of him? Slap me.
Handbags at door.
Another thing that I thought was interesting was I saw an interview where the cast members were talking, all Devon Sawa, Ali Larter, and Kara Smith, about how old they were and what it was like playing a teen role and how this was them aging out of it in a way.
That was the end of my run.
Yeah.
I'm a little too old for that now.
I'm getting gray hair.
I think that I look younger than you guys even still. So I get a lot of these, a lot of the teen movies, and it's tough because, you know, it's not really good stuff. But I'm trying to get out of it now, and we'll see.
I'm 28. I mean, you know, I'm not going to be able to play a kid much longer, so we'll see what happens. I'm definitely looking for, you know, much older projects.
Now, for the final person from the cast I was going to talk about, which I know there's other people in here, but these are the cast members that I figured had the most plot relevance to the movie and the most interesting stories behind them. And I didn't want to make a 2-hour video, so I hope you guys don't mind me making a little bit of a shortcut. But the last one I want to talk about, and he's one of the smallest characters in this film, but he has the biggest touch on this franchise and the most reappearances out of anyone else, is Tony Todd, the horror legend. Now, unfortunately, it's been a while since I've seen this movie, and there was a little bit of sadness that I felt anyways while watching it, knowing that Tony Todd did pass away a couple months ago. But his impact on the genre will be remembered, and he's forever going to be an icon in the hearts of all of us horror fans. He's up there with the horror legends on a horror Mount Rushmore. He'll be greatly missed. So with the synopsis out of the way, I'm going to move over to a plot breakdown of the movie, and I'll sprinkle some more tidbits of filming and behind the scenes and other interviews as we continue. The movie begins with our lead character, Alex, packing for his class trip to Paris. As he's getting ready, you can see his boarding pass on his luggage from his previous flight. His mother sees it, asks him why he still has it on there, and he explains to her that because their last plane didn't go down, if he kept this on, then obviously it meant this plane wasn't going to go down either. And this is just another example of that little bit of dread this movie sows throughout and reminds us of all the little superstitions that we have to convince us that, like, we have more control in this life than what we actually do. No matter how stupid we know they are, we still for some reason do these things, much like the lead character. His mom rips the tag off and wants to know where he got an idea like that. The scene leads us to the airport, where we end up seeing the rest of our cast. I didn't mention this character earlier, but Carter has a girlfriend named Terry, and you'll understand why I didn't mention her as this video goes on, especially since I'm imagining you've already watched the movie. And if you haven't, I don't know why you're still watching this video. Come back before I say some actual spoilers. But we see Carter walking up with Terry, and as they're coming up, Carter knocks over Billy, and he says this of one of the many times, and just wait, you're gonna see me clip this a lot, because it is the funniest shit.
Carter, you dick!
But Sean William Scott, the way he says that, something about it, man, it just sends me to cloud nine. I can't see Sean William Scott as a dorky character, but the way he says that is so funny when, at least for me, stereotypically speaking, I feel like Sean William Scott looks like the guy I don't want to screw with versus Devin Carr. That's just me. Anyways, you'll have to let me know what your take is on that. Entering into the airport, we have Clear Rivers, played by Ali Larter, and you heard that right, Clear, not Claire. Don't ask me where you get a name like that from. But anyways, we have her entering and sitting with everyone else, waiting for the plane to board. And immediately when she walks in, she very much gives the energy of, I'm not like other girls. I will say this much as I think it was written a little cringy, because it's of the time, she still remains to be one of my favorite characters. And I feel like it comes from like a more endearing place than not, but you can very much see that wannabe 2000s edge, I'm different vibe coming from her, and it reminds me so much of that one Demi Lovato song.
Who said I can't wear my Converse with my dress? Well, baby, that's just me.
Around this time, Todd convinces Alex that they need to go poop together before getting on the plane because there's two hot girls that they want to score with, and he doesn't want them to associate that smell with them if they have to go to the bathroom on the plane. And this has always been a scene where, like, I feel like I am not the market demographic for, because I personally would be uncomfortable with that. Maybe that's just the fact that I'm gay, and I'm like, ooh, that's uncomfortable and weird for me. But I did appreciate was one of the behind the scenes videos I saw, someone else commented on it on one of the audience reactions, and I thought it was funny that the directors didn't know what they were talking about, but I was just sitting there like, yes, I have been fucking seen here.
What did you like least about the movie? The shitting. Well,
The
it's
what?
Let's go take a shit.
I've never seen so many toilet scenes in a movie, but yeah, I know Jim and Glenn have some fetish.
The events of this film are kicked off when Alex ends up having a premonition on the plane and freaks out seeing the plane crash as a string of events start happening that happened in his vision. Due to his freak out, 7 people, including himself, are forced to get off the plane, and the events end up happening and the plane does crash. This is Future Justice editing the video, and I realized I completely forgot about an entire plot line. So right after they get off the plane, and this is another little tidbit I forgot to mention, but this movie is so lucky that it got made before 9/11. Like, could you imagine what would have happened to this film if it was, like, made before 9/11, or after 9/11? I mean, sorry. But also, they get questioned by some FBI agents, the most lax questioning you would get pre-9/11, mind you, but we don't care about any of that, okay? None of that matters, okay? What matters is one of those agents, I shit you not, is named Agent Shrek, and that is one of the best things I think I've heard in a while. So I just needed to bestow that upon someone else for someone else to know that a character was unironically called Shrek. But anyways, back to the regular video. 39 days later, after the crash, each person starts dying off one by one that survived the plane crash in various different ways. Now, the first death of the film that we do see is Alex's friend Todd in the shower. Being the first death done by Death himself, it is actually one of the standouts of the franchise, in my opinion, as Todd ends up slipping on some water and falls into the shower, and it wraps around his throat, strangling him to death, making everybody think it's a suicide. The only thing that I didn't like about this death is you see some water leak out of one of the pipes or hoses from the toilet, and that is what causes Todd to slip. You watch this water trail across the floor and follow Todd around with every step he's making until eventually he makes the wrong move and falls into it. But what I didn't like about it wasn't this lead up. I think that built perfect tension. What I thought was odd was seeing the water retract itself and retreat back into the toilet as if it was never there. I don't really understand why death as itself needs to cover its tracks, because water there or not, it still looks like an accident. And what exactly are people going to do if they found out that death was going to get them? You can't really actually stop death. And I feel like as we get through this franchise, we're all going to see that, because no matter who you are, you can't outrun death. After this death, Claire and Alex touch base again, and she shows him her darky-ass sculpture and tries to say that this is him and how he makes her feel. And I tell you what, this is the most alternative 2000s bullshit I have seen in a while, but I am completely fucking here for it. Our two characters, though, after talking about the events that they have survived and what has just happened to their friend, they end up going to the mortuary to see his body, where they run into Tony Todd, and he gives the most phenomenal performance in this film, completely eats the screen in the less than 3 minutes that he's in the whole film, but he leaves such an ominous presence, and hands down, has probably one of, if not the best scenes in this entire movie, and I'm ranking that along the badass death scenes we see throughout this.
And you don't even want to fuck with that Mac Daddy.
Shortly after this, we have Claire and Alex talking over coffee, talking about the premonitions that have happened and what evidence they think they have. And even Claire is starting to get cold feet on what's happening. As they're talking, though, Alex sees a bus go by in the windows, but looks over and there was no bus in the street, and he doesn't know what's going on. Now, not long after this, our entire cast of characters end up back together again. Carter and Tara are driving down the street and almost run into Billy, and they get out of the car as Carter goes to have a fight with Alex, who they see sitting with Claire. Also, the teacher ends up with them for some unbeknownst reason. They all just ended up being on the same street together. So I accidentally deleted this part of the video, but Carter and Alex start to fight, right? And Terry gets frustrated by this and announces to Carter that if he wants to continue fighting with Alex, then he can do that because she's not going to live in the past. And as she walks backwards into the street, she decides to announce to Carter,
Then you can just drop fucking dead.
Anyways, that is easily one of the best kills in this movie. It's probably the most impactful because that's when all the characters start to realize, like, oh shit, something's going on here, and I definitely couldn't just leave that edited out. So just adding that back in, but back to the video. I also want to throw out there, when they were pulling up, they're playing a song with the words Final Destination in the lyrics, and they are very much present. And every time I hear a movie drop its own title in the film, I can't help but think of Peter Griffin.
He said it! He said it!
Eventually, after this, Alex is watching the news and sees on there the path that the explosion would have taken in the plane, and realizes that they are all dying in order of what they would have died on the flight if they would have been on it, and that death is coming for them now one by one until the last one himself is the one that is dead. This leads to him realizing that the teacher is next on Death's list and rushes to her house. Once there, the teacher sees him outside, standing outside like your typical stalker, and decides to call Agent Shrek in to pick him up for questioning. As he's getting questioned, Death starts doing its thing again and is setting its sights on her. She has a mug that she fills with vodka, and I tell you not, the acting choice that was made here was 100% a choice. The way she looks at the mug and realizes it's the school mug and then screams and throws it, I don't know what was going on there. So she slams the cup down, picks it back up, and after filling it with vodka, she starts going around the room with it and is dripping vodka everywhere, and this leads to her eventually starting a fire. An explosion happens, lighting all the vodka up in flames, because apparently the vodka is straight up like gasoline at this point. Like, that must be some strong stuff. She must be drinking like Nikolai or Lewis and Clark, some cheap BS like that smells like rubbing alcohol. That's the only thing I could think of for that happening. As this is happening, Alex gets let out of questioning and rushes to her house to save her, to make sure that she isn't the one next to die. Once he gets there, he sees her on the floor, already bleeding out. A knife had fallen into her chest. Right before he can go to grab the knife, a chair falls down, and the knife finally impales her, and he grabs it, leaving his fingerprints all over it. He rushes out of the home, and Billy sees him with the knife, and is immediately shocked as the house blows up into an explosion of flames. From this point on, Alex is on the run from both FBI agents because they think he's somehow, in some way, shape, or form responsible for the deaths that have happened, including Terry's. Even though everybody saw her, there were plenty of witnesses. She was hit by a bus. Like, what more do you want from him? What better alibi can you have than that? As Alex is on the run, Claire meets up with Carter and Billy so that they can meet up with Alex, so that they can talk about who's next on Death's list and what they need to do to avoid it without the police getting involved as well. I've got to mention again, too, Billy drops his iconic line right here.
Car, you dick!
Once they find Alex, Clear goes out and talks to him and opens up about her life and how death has affected her, and how if we're living in a world where death can fuck you up so much, then screw death, she's not going to let it take control of her life, and they're going to find a way to be it. Now, in the original cut of this film, during audience screenings, there was a scene of Clear and Alex making love, and this is going to lead up more into some stuff I'm going to throw in later. This scene was cut out of the film for a subplot that's no longer in it, and was shown at test screenings with audiences who agreed they didn't like it. I'm actually glad this subplot got cut out, and as the film goes on, I'll trickle in these different scenes that got deleted for this story, and let you guys know about it if you didn't, and I feel like you'll probably be on the same page as me that it wasn't that good anyways. Eventually, though, they are all in Carter's car, and upon Alex telling them about Death's design and who's next up, which is Carter, he decides to announce that he has control over his life and starts driving the car like a madman. As this is all going on, Alex starts having premonitions. He sees a train in the window, even though there's no train there. At another point, he looks down and sees that the belt buckle of his seatbelt is broken, but then he looks down again and it's perfectly intact. Well, Carter ends up stopping at a train, and for a split second thinks that he has control over his own life once again, and realizes that he is unable to escape from the car, that his seatbelt is stuck. Both Claire and Billy exit the car as the train is fast approaching, and Alex goes back to try to get Carter out of the car. With seconds to spare, Alex successfully pulls Carter from the vehicle as the train tears into the car, causing a fiery explosion, and no one is hit. The scene was created with 2 cut pieces of the same model of car and completely emptied of scrap metal to avoid any injury as the train ran into it. This proved to not be of any luck to Billy's character, though, as he starts freaking out and telling Carter he's next. A piece of scrap metal launches from underneath the train and hits Billy in the head, slicing his skull straight in half in one of the more shocking but fun scenes in the movie. And Sean William Scott had a little bit of this to say about what happened behind the scenes with that.
It was really fun, and he sort of broke that down for us. What do you remember about that, having like a plaster head made and all that? What was that experience of having yourself decapitated on film?
Oh, you know, the plaster head thing, like, I did not like that at all. Like, because they said, like, people can freak out, right? I'm sure people have heard about it and read about it. You can go on YouTube and see, like, they do this whole thing, they wrap your head, you can't hear, you can't, like, I don't think you can hear, you can't breathe. I had a full panic attack. Oh, and then I was like, freaking out. And then they said, I didn't want to say the actor's name, but they're like, you're doing better than this guy. And I was like, oh, all right. Then I kind of settled into a little bit, because I was like, I got to do better than that guy.
Another thing that I noticed while rewatching this film that I've never noticed before, and I think maybe it's because of how big my TV is and the HD quality or whatever, but it does clearly look like Carter pissed his pants, and I was like genuinely sitting there like, did I miss something? Like, did Carter pee himself? Was there a line about that? How have I never noticed that before? So I Googled it, and sure enough, there was a Reddit post that shared a picture of it, and someone else had noticed it and said that it was just the rain. But this is a clear instance of some things were not meant to be seen in HD, because that don't look like no rain on his lap, just saying. So Carter ultimately tells Clear and Alex that they need to get the hell out of there because cop sirens are coming. The cops are already looking for Alex, especially with everything going on. With another death, he doesn't need to be there. Now, the next section of this movie, I'm going to kind of just brush over because I do think it's one of the weaker sections of the film. I don't entirely like how it sets up, personally anyways. They go into this a little bit on the Dead Meat podcast episode on this film, and I'll leave a link to it because they share a lot of similar thoughts that I do to it, especially because I think it's supposed to build tension of whether or not Death is the one actually doing these things. But because of the weird instances where we see Death, like, we don't see him, but we do see him essentially. But on the tea kettle as the black shadowy figure, the water retracting back in the toilet, it kind of takes away the idea that, like, it's not all in Alex's head, which I think for the first film, that could have been a way better take on it. I very much agree with James and Chelsea's idea that they mentioned on that in the podcast, but that's not what they go for. So it just kind of makes this scene feel a little pointless to me. What I will mention, though, that I'm imagining would have taken place during this scene that was a cutscene is going back to our earlier storyline of Clear and Alex having sex. There's a scene of Clear in her home taking a pregnancy test and it pops up as positive. We'll leave that there for now until we get to further in the movie to our final cutscene. Alex goes to Claire's cabin in the woods though because he believes that he is next, but as he is there, he realizes that he wasn't next on the list. It would be Clear that was next because he switched seats with Todd at the beginning of the movie. As we get to the end of the movie, we come to our final set piece where Clear very much comes across as your typical final girl, and this is a perfect instance of the idea that this film is essentially a slasher movie. It's just the unseen slasher killer because you have Clear running in her house all over the place, climbing on the roof, going down hallways as all these explosions and fires and stuff are happening all around her, but there's no actual killer there. It's all around her, essentially, which I do think ties in pretty well, at least conceptually, it being scarier than a Jason or a Michael Myers type running after you. This all leads up to Clear being trapped in her car as water is all underneath the car. A power line has hit the ground, electrocuting the water and causing a fire on top of the hood. Alex comes running in to grab the cable to save Clear's life. And during this, Alex electrocutes himself and Clear jumps from the car seconds before it explodes, and Alex is on the ground getting chest compressions. Now, before I get into the actual ending of this movie, we're going to talk about the alternate ending that I touched on a couple minutes ago. In the original ending of this film, Alex burns to death after saving Clear. It immediately cuts after his death to Clear giving birth to their child that she also names Alex. One thing that I am really glad about this ending changing is it just felt too sappy and sentimental, especially the more and more it goes on. A lot of the test audiences felt a lot of the same ways that I felt about it too, especially with scenes such as her being in the bedroom with the baby and feeling a gust of air in the room. And it felt like it was a callback to earlier in the movie when she tells Alex that she feels this cold presence around her that's dark and that's evil, which would have been death. But the presence she feels with her in this cutscene is Alex, and she even announces his name. And I don't like that. It is so cheesy. It borders on Hallmark. Like, I get what they were going for with like a sentimental ending, but like I don't think that was it. And I'm glad that they figured out it wasn't it either and changed it. Eventually it also leads to Carter dying, which apparently audiences were pissed about. Why would you kill Alex and have Carter live? Carter's a dick. I mean, how many times did Billy have to say it? To this storyline getting cut though at the end, they cut their entire romance because audiences weren't into the romance subplot whatsoever. And I think that you can still see the chemistry between Alex and Clear without that storyline being there. In fact, I think it's done better without it getting spoon-fed to us as an audience, so kudos to them for doing that. After Alex gets electrocuted, the agents are on the scene and give him chest compressions, bringing him back to life. It cuts to 6 months later, and Carter, Alex, and Clear are all getting off a flight to Paris, all excited because they beat death. As they're there, though, Alex starts questioning, did they actually beat death? Like, it can't really be over, right? Like, death just doesn't stop coming for you, right? As Alex is trying to give this breakdown, though, Clear and Carter both are trying to tell him that they just need to move on from the events that happened, that things will be okay. As this starts happening, though, chain reaction events start happening all over again, leading to this giant sign in Paris to start falling down, a near miss to Alex. And as Alex gets saved by Clear, Carter is left standing there going, who's next? Before the sign comes tumbling down, and right before it can hit him, we jump right to the credits, ending the film. So I would have enjoyed seeing more of Carter's death and it not being an off-screen type of thing. I do think that was a fun ending to go with. Like, every horror movie needs to have a twist, and it always ties in perfectly with They Always Come Back. When this movie came out, critics were harsh to it, and it was critically panned. And even if you look now at Rotten Tomatoes, it does have a 36%. But audiences fell in love with the movie, and if you look at Rotten Tomatoes now, though the score isn't still like the best score, it does have a 68% audience rating, which I think is way more fitting to this film. With a budget of only $23 million, the movie ended up grossing $123 million, essentially cementing the fact that there was going to be a sequel. A part of the reason they didn't kill Alex's character off at the end of the movie was because they wanted the opportunity to bring him back for a sequel. Although we're going to see that it was kind of pointless once we cover the second movie to even save Alex with how he's handled in the second movie. If you know, you know. Anyways, that about covers up my wrap-up and deep dive into the plot and little tidbits of behind-the-scenes information on the first Final Destination film. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I do want to say for my wrapping thoughts on this first film is that I do think it's a really good movie, if you couldn't tell by how highly I praised it throughout. This is definitely a really nostalgic movie for me, and even though I don't think this film necessarily did anything to change the horror genre, I do think it is still a really good movie. We'll be covering Final Destination 2, which was released in theaters in 2003. The film follows Kimberly, who has a premonition of a horrible highway accident killing multiple people, including her and her friends. She blocks the cars behind her on the ramp from joining traffic, and as a police trooper arrives, the accident actually happens. Now, death is stalking this group of survivors, and one by one, they are dying as they were supposed to, in her vision. Now, right off the bat, it's been a second since I've seen this movie, and in the original viewing I had of this film and my prior experiences with it, this one ranked at the top of my list, and I'm just going to be completely candid. I didn't hate this rewatch. I still very much enjoyed it, but it did feel a little bit dated to me in some parts and not in the best of ways. So though it's not a bad movie, I do think it has dropped down my list. How far, I don't know yet, because I haven't watched all the other films again yet in the franchise, so by the time I'm done with these videos, I'll do some kind of ranking. We'll see where it lands, but currently, the first Final Destination film lands number 1 on my ranking. I think it was very well done. And as I'm going through this video, I'll explain some of the reasons why it fell down a little bit for me and why I don't think it held up as well as it used to for myself. Just like my last video, we're going to go over some of the behind the scenes details. We're going to talk about some of the stuff leading up to casting, and then we're going to do a full plot breakdown of the film. So I think it goes without saying that there is going to be spoilers in this video, and this movie's been out for a while, so if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it, come back to this video. Anyways, on with the video. Now, after the success of the first film, New Line Cinema obviously wanted a sequel made, so they approached Jeffrey Reddick to write yet another script. He agreed to this, and he decided when writing this script that he was going to expand upon the mythology that was presented in the first one. I'm going to get into this as we're doing the plot breakdown, but the deleted subplot that I discussed in my last video actually does have a little bit of a return, and I think that was incorporated very well. And that's something that I give mad credit to him for, was not overstuffing that original movie with that concept, but bringing it back for this one. I think it's awesome when you have writers that write the original film and then cut some ideas out, but then retouch on those and rework them into future scripts. I always think that's very smart writing. Don Mancini of the Child Play franchise does that constantly. I think that leads to some of the best sequels on these ideas that actually get like a chance to cook. Now, his fellow co-writers and the original director of the original were unavailable to do this project, so they hired a new director in David R. Ellis, a stunt coordinator. He was excited to take on the role, and one of his direct quotes was, "How can we make Death a total badass in this movie?" And I think that he did succeed at that, especially with the iconic opening scene. Like, if you know, you know. The only returning actors in this film is, once again, Tony Todd, reprising his role as the coroner from the first film. And again, he only has one scene in the movie, but another top-notch performance from an amazing horror actor. The other returning cast member and the only other character in the franchise, aside from Tony Todd, to have a returning role is Ali Larter, and she was very welcome to this movie. Unfortunately, Devon Sawa didn't return, and there's a lot of debates and speculation for why he wasn't in this film. According to the creators of the movie, they chose to not have him in it, that from a narrative standpoint, they didn't want him to be there. For me, I don't think that holds up very well, especially with the way that they write off his character in the movie. It makes no sense. And you guys, I feel like are going to agree with me once we get there. There was no reason for the way to be handled. So I'm assuming that A, he was busy with another project, or B, they didn't want to pay him what he was worth, because that shit happens constantly. Now, the role of Kimberly, who plays the main heroine in this film, who has the premonition that kicks off all this, is played by AJ Cook. And the director was noted as saying that once she auditioned, he was blown away by her sensitivity, and she immediately got the role.
Once we saw tape on AJ and then we brought her in, she just nailed it.
You guys all heard about Flight 180, right? How they'd get the survivors off the plane. You mean it's Browning? Yeah. My premonition is just like his.
I think she did a really good job and is one of the better final girls in this franchise. And her co-lead, Michael Lanz, was casted onto the film shortly after.
A little bit. I think this movie is a little heightened, of course, but no, it's a much more interesting, to me, and clever idea than to have a typical horror movie with a guy with chasing you with a plunger or something.
Look, you weren't there. It was weird. She knew she knew the log truck was going to shit the bed. She knew.
They called me on a Thursday. They said, go in and read. And I went in and read. And then they hired me Friday, and I was on a plane Sunday.
One thing that I saw, too, once AJ Cook got the role that made no sense to me was they had her dye her hair brown so she could be a brunette, because at this time, Ali Larter was a blonde. And apparently, in the 2000s, you couldn't have two blondes in a movie. Apparently that's confusing to us as an audience. Don't ask me how that makes any sense. Furthermore, Clear was a brunette in the first film, so why not just keep her a brunette? But hey, they did what they did. Can't go back now. I'm not going to get into the cast of all the other characters. There's a few standouts that I'm going to touch on throughout the video. The ones that come to mind to me are Rari, who plays this lovable but also kind of shitty guy who very much has a drug problem. And then we have Kat, who plays this very iconic bitch, and I'm probably going to throw a few quotes from her throughout because I thought she was hilarious the way that she portrayed this character. The rest of them just kind of filled the body count for me personally. But now that we got that out of the way, we're going to jump into the plot analysis of the movie, and I'll throw in little tidbits of behind the scenes information that I found out. There was a really cool mini behind the scenes documentary I saw where they discussed how they did all the special effects in this film. I'll link it down below so you guys can check it out if you want to. It's only 20 minutes. And there's another documentary I found where it goes into the casting of all the characters, shows some of their screen tests. So if you guys want to see that, it'll be right down below. Now the film begins with Kimberly in bed, and the news is on and she's sleeping, and it's covering this interview show that's discussing the events of the last film, how everyone started to die one by one after having this vision and escaping this plane crash. As she's laying in bed, I got the heebie-jeebies because there's this big-ass, nasty spider crawling around with her, and at one point, towards the end of the scene, it crawls behind her back, and I fucking hate spiders. I love horror movies, but I refuse to watch horror movies about spiders because that shit just gives me the heebie-jeebies too much. I have been able to sit through such films as Human Centipede, Cannibal Holocaust, not enjoyably, mind you, but I sat through those. I actually had some interest in checking those out, but Arachnophobia and Eight-Legged Freaks, you ain't catching me there. The film cuts to the next day, and Kimberly is getting in her vehicle to go on a trip with her friends, and her dad notices that there is transmission fluid leaking from her car. He gives her a call to let her know that she needs to get it checked. Right off the bat, all of her friends seem to be very run-of-the-mill horror movie characters. Your group of promiscuous teens who dabble in drinking and drugs, so it was nothing original there. And spoilers, but if you're this far, then you should have clicked out. Thank God we don't have to deal with them for much of the movie. The only one that stood out to me was the blonde, but that's not saying much because none of them really had any dialogue or character to them with how short they're in the movie. As we continue, they start driving down this highway, and Kimberly starts noticing all these weird things. They first pull off onto the highway, and this homeless woman comes up to her vehicle, slams her hands on the window, and has a bag of cans. It splits open, hits the ground. They go onto the highway. Highway to Hell starts playing on the radio. There's a kid in the car next to them that's smashing trucks together. There's all these just distracted drivers. You have this couple on a motorcycle, and the girl just starts flashing her tits at their vehicle. The woman in the car next to them, who will be revealed later to be Kat, is on the phone, barely paying attention to the road. And then there's a semi-truck that passes them that has a sign on it, like most semi-trucks do, where you can call the company and let them know, like, hey, how's my driving? And it also has a sign on there, I believe, that says, don't drink and drive. But then they see the guy in the rig, and what is he doing? He's drinking and driving. This all eventually leads up to the more than iconic highway premonition. To this day, I don't think there's many other horror franchises that can say that they have such an iconic scene that everybody knows who hasn't even seen the movie. Like, the last film, I discussed how this movie was a huge success, but I don't really think it helped transcend the genre. It didn't do anything that was impactful. It didn't change the horror landscape. And though I don't think any of the films in this franchise do that, per se, this film has arguably one of the scenes that just sticks with people. Like, how many people on the highway see a logging truck and immediately get this pit in their gut, like, oh god, no, what if the chain's on that snap and it starts falling? It would never happen the way it does in this film, but the way that it sticks with people, including myself, like, kudos to them. This is honestly one of the best premonitions in the entire franchise, in my opinion. As the premonition starts, all these people that she saw on the highway start dying as the logs start rolling off the truck. One thing that I saw behind the scenes that I found kind of interesting was they tried doing this with practical effects, but the logs would only bounce a couple inches off the ground, not multiple feet up into the air as they do in the movie. So they had to use CGI to make the logs bounce the way that they did. And not only that, they also cut in some other parts of the actual logs breaking apart so that it flowed better and looked more real. And I always think CGI looks way better when you have a base of what the original thing is versus an entire green screen. I'm looking at you, Marvel. But as the crash continues, Kimberly and her friends are swerving around the road. And finally, at the end, she sees this guy burning up, and this semi-truck rams through his car as he's screaming and rams at them, killing all of her and her friends. And then moments later, she wakes up and realizes that none of it's happened, at least not yet. All these things that she saw in her vision start really happening. The homeless woman with the cans comes to their window. Highway to Hell is playing on the radio. She starts to panic, and her friends don't understand why she's freaking out so much, but she knows this is about to happen. She's heard about this before with the kids from Flight 180. So she ends up blocking traffic and stopping all these different people from getting onto the highway. As she's blocking the traffic, you see all of our survivors of the film, or survivors for now, getting upset that they have to wait. They don't understand what the holdup is. Marcus, the officer, goes up to her vehicle to see what's happening, and he has her get out of the car to talk to her. And she tries explaining to him that the crash is going to happen, that she saw it, that it was real. As she's doing all this, the crash does happen, and her friends are sitting there not understand what's going on. They even look to her like to ask her what's happening. Before she can even say anything, the semi-truck that killed them in her vision ends up barreling towards them. And before she has a chance to jump away, Marcus jumps in and pushes her away from the crash as the semi knocks into her car, killing all of her friends instantly. One thing that I thought was kind of funny rewatching this, especially after just rewatching the original one, is it took Death 39 days to actually start picking everyone off. and realizing that it fucked up and needed to clean up its dirty work. Versus this time, instantaneously after, he's just like, nah, these are 4 more people that I don't want to chase around. Like, let's just get fucking rid of them. Even, like, at the end of the original Final Destination, it cuts to, I believe, 3 months later. Like, Death ain't doing this shit this time. He's getting the shit covered up, dealt with, done. Fuck these guys. But now that we have our fake cast of characters, or friends, dead, we see our actual cast all in the police interrogation room as Kimberly explains her premonition, which none of them really believe her except for Marcus, who starts to have this weird suspicion, kind of like Clear did with Alex, that maybe there is something to her story. After we leave the police interrogation room, we follow one of our survivors of the crash, who is this guy that just won the lottery, and he's going into his home with this huge stack of what would have been, at the time, top of the line electronics. As he's in his apartment, though, he starts cooking up some old Chinese food, turns on his answering machine and listens to some old messages. And as he's cooking his food, there is alphabet letter magnets on the fridge, and one falls down, revealing some of the best foreshadowing I've seen in so long. And I am saying that very, very sarcastic. Love when movies do that blatantly obvious foreshadowing. It always cracks me up. One of my favorite offenders of this is probably A Cinderella Story with Hilary Duff.
Because waiting for you is like waiting for rain in this drought. Useless and disappointing.
As he's cooking, though, he hears all these voicemails of all these women that obviously don't care about him. They're excited for his money, and that's exactly why they're hitting him up, and they're all being very, very flirty, and it's very much giving player energy as he's cooking his food and is kind of like smirking to himself.
Hey, Evan. It's Tawny. Sorry I haven't called. Hey, listen, I heard about your lottery win. Let's hook up.
Yeah.
Hi, Evan. It's Nikki. We met at Tuffer's party last year. I know it's been a while, but I've been thinking about you.
Honey, we love you.
Shut up, baby. I know it.
But as this continues, Death is up to its old antics again, and a chain reaction of events start to happen. He doesn't notice the magnet that fell off into his Chinese food, and he threw it in the microwave. And then his ring falls down the garbage disposal, and he shoves his hand down there, and it gets stuck. The magnet ends up causing the microwave to explode, and the apartment catches fire. And right when you think he's about to burn to death in his apartment, he unleashes his hand and rushes down the fire escape, barely missing this huge explosion that just completely annihilates his apartment. Right when you think he's gotten away, he's going down the ladder and falls on his back, and the ladder comes down, just barely stopping before his eye. And right when he thinks he's safe, the ladder launches down and impales him right through his eye. Did you guys get it? The magnet said that eye, and then he got gouged through the eye. Oh, you did. Oh, okay. All the survivors are at home after all this transpires that night, and on the news, they all see his death, and they get this lingering feeling of fear as they start to question, maybe there is something going on. Maybe Kimberly was onto something. Kimberly sees this, though, and immediately starts doing her own research and discovers that Clear is still alive, and she's actually in this asylum. So the next day, she rushes down to go see her. She gets to this asylum, and she discovers that Clear isn't locked up there against her own will. She chose to be locked up there. She figured that being in this padded room was the safest way that she had of avoiding death, that she wasn't going to let death get her, that she'd rather live no life at all than being at the mercy of death, who would give her this gruesome way of going out. Kimberly tries to get some info from her and lets her know that she has skipped death. In her vision, when Marcus saved her before her friends were hit, he skipped her on the timeline. So unlike last time, death is working backwards, because in the vision, the lotto winner was second to last to die. Clear is flabbergasted, to say the least, that Death is working with a different design this time around, as Kimberly is trying to discover how to skip Death and end this once and for all. Clear gives her some reassuring words, quote unquote.
Congratulations. You'll be the last to go. But don't worry. Once the others are dead, it'll come back for you.
Essentially, Clear tells Kimberly to buzz off. She isn't willing to put herself in that situation again, especially after her best friend Alex from the last film died by a falling brick that hit him in the head. Now, this is the part where I'm going to bitch a little bit, because Alex was literally the main character in our last movie, and not only are you going to have him go out off screen, but he gets killed by a falling brick. Like, are you fucking kidding me? That is the most unceremonious way that you could kill off a lead character. So many other characters in the last film had such iconic deaths, and even the worst deaths in that last movie are better than his death, the main character's death. But anyways, I digress. Back to the video. Even though Clear doesn't agree to help Kimberly, she does let her know that if you recognize the signs, then you can get Death to skip you and you can beat it, at least temporarily. Kimberly goes back to her house and finds that Marcus the officer is there, and he has done his own research at this point and is far more believing what she has to say. As they're standing in front of her house, though, she gets a premonition in her window pane of all these pigeons flying around. She realizes that the mother and son that were in her vision in the highway accident are next, so she rushes to save them. Now, the mother-son duo are at the dentist office so the son can get his mouth worked on, and outside there are construction workers working. Dora waits out in the waiting room, and just like in the original movie, where water starts to follow Todd around, you have a scene of the exact same thing happening to her as water is creeping towards her feet and starts covering this light socket. But just as the water becomes electrocuted by the socket, she sidesteps it. And then as the boy is in the room, he is using laughing gas to knock him out, because the doctor didn't feel comfortable doing a needle at that moment because pigeons kept flying into the window and cracking the glass. The doctor steps away though, and the boy is under. A toy fish that's dangling from the ceiling falls out and lands into his mouth, and right when you think he's about to suffocate on it, his assistant nurse comes in and pulls the toy from his mouth, and the look on her face easily reads, fuck, we just avoided a lawsuit. As the mother and son duo are stepping out of the dentist office though, Kimberly and Marcus come running up to them and yelling and screaming at them. She sees a flock of pigeons and she yells to them, but the boy doesn't listen and he runs directly at the pigeons, scaring them. They fly up in this construction vehicle, and this giant piece of glass that he has craned in the air comes smashing down, crushing the boy right in front of his mouth.
He's just got this, he's always happy and everything's excellent, and that's this little friend of mine, James, who plays my son Tim. He's so happy to be here. Too bad he has to die.
Both Kimberly and Marcus try to talk with the mother after this happens, and she doesn't want anything to do with it. She's grieving the loss of her son. So they go back to Kimberly's house, and once they get there, Clear has decided to come and help them out finally. And it is at this point in my notes that I realized I've been writing her name down as Claire, which honestly, it should just be Claire. I don't understand. I mean, I went to the mini little rant about it last time, but seeing as this is her last movie, we'll just get it out of the way so that, like, maybe I can come to terms with it. But Clear Rivers, that is the stupidest name I've ever heard. I mean, it's original, I'll give him that, but Clear Rivers. Anyways, Clear comes and lets them know that she doesn't know what to do to defeat Death, but she just might know somebody that does. Clear takes them to the corner from the last film, and he immediately greets her as if she's an old friend in this super creep kind of way. And Clear tries to get him to tell them, like, how they can beat Death. And he tells them that essentially there is no way to beat death, that they broke death's design and he's going to come for them. And she calls out his bluff and tells them that, like, time and time again, that they were able to prolong and get death to skip them, her and all of her friends in the last film. And if there is a way to get death to skip them, then there has to be a way to be able to defeat it once and for all and use death's defective design to their benefit. It is then revealed from the coroner that new life can stop death and save everyone else. And this was a dropped plot from the original film. And if you guys watched my last video, I discussed this. I'll go over a brief synopsis of it really quick. In the original movie, Clear and Alex have sex and she ends up taking a pregnancy test and she's pregnant. And then after Alex dies in the original ending of the movie, she ends up having his baby. And it was supposed to be a sign that this new life is what ended up saving her and Carter in the end, that it was the thing that broke death's design and made it to where they could actually live out a normal life again. Back to the second one though, they hear the news of this and Kimberly remembers that there was a pregnant woman that was in the crash with them, and she was one of the people that ended up surviving. So they immediately jump to, hey, we have to make sure this woman lives and has her baby, and then we all get saved, essentially. Before they leave, though, the coroner ends up directly speaking to Kimberly. And again, just like in the last movie, he pops into the movie a creep and then leaves the movie a total creep in a matter of minutes.
You have to follow the signs, Kimberly.
How do you know my name?
Kimberly has another vision and she sees a woman in a van drowning, and the pregnant woman was in a van in her vision originally. So they immediately jump to she is drowning to death. So the officer ends up putting out a bulletin that the pregnant woman is driving the stolen vehicle. We cut to Rory, our lovable druggie, who is going into this elevator, and there's this guy in the elevator with him, and he just starts doing all this really weird shit.
What?
I absolutely love his character. He is easily one of the best things about this film. He ends up going into Kimberly's apartment, and all of the other survivors of the crash are there as well, everyone aside from the pregnant woman. Clear, Marcus, and Kimberly all start explaining death's design to the group of them, and some of them are quick to believe and other ones aren't so much. Clear even tries to explain to them that even though Kimberly is the only one who can have visions, all of them can see signs to some extent. They start safe-proofing the apartment, and they all know that Nora's next, and this is the beginning of my love for the total bitch cat.
Screw this. I just gotta bite it before me anyhow, huh?
As they're finishing up, though, the mother and Eugene end up deciding to leave. The mother decides that her son's dead, like maybe she doesn't care about whether or not death's coming for her, even though she is next. And Eugene doesn't believe in this, that he thinks it's all this superstitious nonsense, and that these last two deaths were just coincidences. Shortly after they leave, though, Rory is still trying to clean up, and he goes into this closet and knocks all this stuff over, and then there is this shadow in the light of a man with a bunch of hooks, and I'm sure there's some kind of Candyman joke I can throw in there, but nothing comes to mind right now. They see this and realize that this is a sign they need to let the mother know immediately. Well, her and Eugene are in the elevator now, and there's this total creeper in the elevator with them that starts like sniffing her hair and looking her up and down. Even Eugene gives him a side eye. But he's holding this crate filled with all of these cans that have hooks on the end of them. Nora gets this phone call. They let her know that a man with hooks is going to kill her. Well, she drops her phone and goes to pick it up, and as she realizes that a man with hooks is in the elevator, she panics and jumps up, and one of the hooks catches her by the hair. And if she would have just taken even a millisecond to just calm down and pull her hair out, she could have so easily survived this movie. But her stupidity is honestly what took her out. She could not have made it any easier for death if she tried. But she ends up trying to rush out of the elevator as the elevator doors open, and the doors almost immediately slam shut on her neck, and the elevator starts to go up. and it ends up chopping off her head as Clear and Kat come running behind to try to pull her out.
A couple of months later, you'll be riding the elevator.
Yeah.
You know.
You think twice about sticking your arm in the elevator to stop the doors from closing. That's for sure.
We cut back to the apartment, and Eugene rushes in saying that he controls his life. Fuck Death, that Death doesn't have control over him. And he tries to shoot himself to prove it, but as he shoots each bullet, none of them goes off, and they find out that all 5 bullets were blanks. It wasn't his turn. Death wasn't going to let him go out that easily. As they have this realization, Claire and Kat come walking back into the apartment.
Can we find the pregnant woman now, please?
We cut to a little bit later, and they're driving down the highway, and we discover that all these survivors of the crash were survivors of the accidents that everyone died in the last film. And don't think too hard into this because it's very convoluted, but for a sequel, I think it's a very cool plot. I mean, there are so many sequels that throw out Easter eggs and stuff like this that make no sense, but they're just fun to see. I mean, even just look at the memento room of all the past Scream movies, and Scream 6 makes no sense, but it's fucking badass. But in this one, we discover that each person that was supposed to die in this accident but didn't had been involved in the previous accident that killed all of Claire's friends. Kat was supposed to go to this hotel, and there was a propane leak that killed a whole bunch of people, and she would have died. But fortunately, she ended up not going because her bus hit Terry in the last film. And Kimberly, her mother passed away. And the only reason that she avoided death was because her and her mom were at the mall, and her mom went out to the car, and she got distracted watching the TV and saw the news of Todd's death. And while she was watching the news, her mom was out of the car and got shot and killed by some muggers. It's hearing all of these stories from each other that Clear realizes that Death is trying to clean up its loose ends. Right after they have this heart-to-heart, though, their vehicle has a blowout, and Kat, who's driving, ends up swerving all over the road, and the car ends up wrecking in front of this farmhouse, and there's fuel starting to leak from the bottom of the car. And not only that, pipe lodged through the vehicle, slicing through Kat's seat and barely missing her head. Eugene now has a collapsed lung, and they call an ambulance to rush him down to the hospital. As all this is going on, though, a newsman comes pummeling down the road in front of the farmhouse, and the farmer's son almost gets hit by the van, but right before he can, Rory pulls him out of the way to save him. So I was in the process of editing this video, and I realized I completely forgot to add this scene of Rory with Kimberly, and they have this really sweet heart-to-heart, and I really think that it excels his character for more of just being this side comedic relief.
If I die, just throw out my drugs and my paraphernalia, my porno, you know, anything that's gonna break my mom's heart.
Throughout the movie, Kat has been smoking these really long cigarettes. They very much remind me of Cruella de Vil's cigarette. It only makes her that much more iconic to me. I don't care what anyone says. But as she's smoking her cigarette, one of the emergency responders comes up and starts trying to get her out of the vehicle with this battering ram because there's a log lodged to the vehicle over the top of her legs. This eventually leads to this awesome scene.
Could you be a little quieter with that thing, please?
Yeah, sure. I'll just put it on quiet mode.
That would be good.
R.I.P. to my favorite bitch, may she rest in peace. Her cigarette ends up falling from her hand, though, and sets fire to the fuel that was leaking from the car, which causes an explosion, and this barbed wire fence goes flying through the air, and before Rory can even react, it slices through his body and kills him right in front of Marcus and Kimberly. The behind the scenes for Rory's death was completely epic. The way they were able to use green screens while also doing practical effects, touching on what I was saying earlier, was really cool. I don't even know how to begin to explain how they did the scene, so I'll just show a couple clips here because the creators obviously do a way better job.
From the sternum up, that was the actor with his head, his shoulders, and his arms sticking out of this puppet. The actor is the main part of the whole gag. Just prior to closing up the body, once the actor was inside of it, we were able to open up a trapdoor and put all kinds of intestines inside and lung.
And then they had positioned and get stacked up there and just kind of leaning over bizarrely. 1, 2, 3, pull. And one guy pulls this way, he falls down that way.
In the post-production process, we can get rid of all the other people that were involved in that particular gag that are seamlessly blended away and removed.
Now we're going to backtrack a little bit on the plot here and discuss the pregnant woman, because during all these events, they're trickling in more and more stuff about what's going on with her. Marcus's partner does end up finding her, and she gets arrested and takes her to the jail, and she's pissed off because her vehicle isn't stolen. It's her van. And while she's in the jail, though, her water ends up breaking, and he has to rush her to the hospital.
I am not gonna have my baby in a jail cell! Get me to the hospital! Okay.
Our trio of survivors, Marcus, Kimberly, and Clear, rush to the hospital to make sure that her pregnancy goes off without a hitch. Before they leave, though, Kimberly has another vision of what she believes is the pregnant woman getting choked out by this doctor, and all she can see is Dr. Kalarjian. So they know that they need to get to the hospital and stop Dr. Kalarjian from killing the pregnant woman. Eugene, who is already there, is connected to oxygen because of his collapsed lung. And after the doctors leave him alone, that starts yet another chain reaction, because he is next after all. One of the cords pops off of one of the oxygen tanks as the vents in the room close up. The ventilator is getting pulled from the wall and shuts off as the cord becomes unplugged, and Eugene finds that he can't breathe. Our trio makes it to the hospital, and Clear splits up to go and find him to make sure that he's okay. Marcus and Kimberly go rushing to find Dr. Kalarjian. They end up finding her and stopping her from being able to deliver the pregnant woman's baby, which causes her to be able to have a successful birth. They rush to her room and they see that she's just had the baby, and they jump for joy knowing that they beat death, and she couldn't be more confused who these people are. Right as she gives birth, the cord to Eugene's ventilator was just enough in the wall that it starts working again and he's able to breathe. And all of our characters are able to have a sigh of relief, knowing that this has finally come to an end, that they've survived this, that they beat death. They find Clear and let her know, and she goes over to Eugene's room, but before she makes it in there, Kimberly has another vision. In her vision, she sees the pileup once more, and also in her vision, the pregnant woman never died. She was never meant to die that day. This leads Kimberly to realize that they didn't stop death, that death was still coming for them. And before she can stop Clear from stepping into Eugene's room, she opens the door, and between all the oxygen from the broken tank that's unleashed in the room and a small spark from the outlet, an explosion breaks out, killing both Eugene and Clear almost instantly. In the film, you see Clear get burned to a singe and her body get thrown down this hall, but you don't actually see Eugene die other than a cut scene.
Luckily for me, I don't get to see myself die. When it's time to go, it's time to go. You have no control over that.
Gotta say, if I was in a horror movie, I would be pretty pissed if I was killed off and my death wasn't even shown in the movie, because that's like one of my bucket list things, is to be able to die in a movie. I think that would be so fucking cool. But anyways, I digress. After the explosion breaks out, though, it destroys the hall of the hospital and throws our final survivors, Kimberly and Marcus, to the ground. They're trying to get up. Kimberly notices that her hands are all cut up and bloody, just like the woman in her vision that was in the van, and she realizes that the vision wasn't of the pregnant woman, it was of her the whole time, and that it was her that was able to stop this. Before she can tell Marcus exactly what she's doing, she whispers to him to get Dr. Kalarjian and steals an ambulance and crashes it into the lake outside the hospital. Marcus goes chasing after her. He jumps into the water after her as the ambulance is sinking, and he watches her as she drowns to death, and then everything goes black.
Only new life can defeat death.
It is my time to go and be in heaven.
Do to save us.
There are no known survivors.
I have to die.
We cut to her waking up as Dr. Kalarjian is giving her CPR, bringing her back to life. Her and Marcus are together and realize that they finally did it, that Kimberly was the new life all along, that they are saved from death. finally giving us a happy ending for some of our characters. A couple months later, they are at the farmer's house of the farm that they crashed in front of previously. One thing I found odd about this scene is the fact that they were having a barbecue here of all places. I don't understand why these farmers would have invited them back. Also, Kimberly has a dad who I've hardly touched on in this video. In fact, I think I only brought him up once, but it's because he's such a nothing character. I think it would have made way more sense to bring him back to like kind of have the movie come full circle, but obviously they weren't going to do that for the twist we're about to get to. Our group of survivors though are chit-chatting, BSing, they're eating kebabs, and for some reason Marcus decides that it's a good idea to try to deep throat his kebab and then gets surprised that it almost stabbed him.
Hey, Lois, little less yakety-yak, a little more cutting up my banana. What am I supposed to do, stick the whole thing in my mouth? I mean, oh, hello.
As they're eating, though, the farmers tell them that Rory actually saved their son that day, explaining the only reason why the writers decided to bring them back in the film. Right after they tell Marcus and Kimberly this, though, the propane tanks on the barbecuer explode, killing their son instantly, and the film ends with the mom screaming as the son's arm goes flying directly on her plate in front of her, and we roll to the credits. Okay, so I'll be the first to admit that I had way more fun talking about this movie than actually watching it again. I do stand by that. I don't think it holds up as well as it used to for me. I did still enjoy it, and even discussing it made me remember some of the things that I absolutely loved about this film. But overall, I don't think it stacks up as well as the first one does. I don't know, there's just some charm that I felt in the first one. I can't even put my finger on exactly what it was, but I don't think this one quite reaches that level, and I'm curious to see how it'll rank amongst the other films once I go through and do a rewatch of it. But I would definitely recommend this movie, especially after watching the first one. I think it makes a great double feature because in the franchise, I would say these are the two that are the most connected out of all of them. Audiences at the time were very excited about this movie even. I mean, it was made on a $26 million budget and ended up grossing $186 million, being the highest grossing Final Destination movie to date. Good God, ignore me for the next couple minutes because I got my numbers all wrong. This wasn't the highest grossing movie. The Final Destination was the highest grossing movie. The fourth one, the worst one in the franchise, which that's gonna take me some time to like come to terms with that. This one actually only grossed about $90 million and was the lowest grossing one in the box office, so you're going to hear me rambling on for a brief second. Ignore that idiot. He didn't know any better. Fingers crossed the new one does those kinds of numbers and we get another one after this, but we'll have to wait and see till May. Of course, with reviews like that, they greenlit another movie. And again, this film wasn't a critical darling by any means when it came out. Critics wrote it off as yet another excuse to just show some gruesome death scenes in place of actual characters. And honestly, they should have known they were signing up for that. That's what all of these movies are about in the first place. So buzz off, stay in your lane and watch things that you'll actually be able to appreciate versus not, but whatever. Today, I'm going to be delving back into the Final Destination franchise and picking up where I left off with Final Destination 3. I kind of burnt myself out after the last two videos. They were very research heavy for me just starting out doing this. It was a little too much for me, I think. So we're going to change up the format a little bit, but I'm still going to throw in like here and there some behind the scenes facts. It'll be more similar to my newest video about The Ring. So it's going to be like that. With that all out of the way, like, let's jump into this movie and I'll tell you guys what I thought of it. Now it's been a hot second since I've actually rewatched this one. For some reason, the last time I watched it, I thought it was kind of boring for some reason, and I don't know if I was just having a bad day or something, because upon this rewatch, I had so much fun with this movie. Like, I have no complaints hardly at all with it, and I'm gonna get right into it, but I really do think that they nailed the formula of the first two films in this one. And I also love the anthology aspect that was added to the franchise within this movie. Something that the producers even talked about behind the scenes when they were making this film is that the first two were like so close and like married to each other, essentially. You had Clear coming back from the first film, and then like all of the people that survived the premonition in the second film were also survivors of accidents that happened to our characters from the first. And they didn't want to do that. They wanted it to be more of a standalone flick where you could have a new set of characters defying death. And I do enjoy that they did that. I think here it works to great effect. Future sequel is not going to be that case, but here I think it works perfectly well, honestly. And though it is very much like made apparent that it's an anthology, you still have little callbacks here and there to the last two films. You have a direct reference to Flight 180 when the characters are doing their thing where they're like researching when this has happened to other people, like in the second film. And they vaguely talk about how all the kids from Flight 180 died after they left the plane. You even have in a deleted scene a callback to both Officer Burke, which insert right here. The second video I did for this, for some reason, I kept calling him Marcus, and someone in the comments called me out for it, and I didn't even realize the whole video that I did that. I edited it, I posted it, and I didn't realize I did that at all. So that person that called me out, like, you are 110% right to do that. So, like, I take all the hate. Like, if you want to give it to me, go at it. Anyways, though, in this deleted scene, you have a newspaper that flies into the camera at the end of the film that shows Officer Burke and Kimberly on the front of the newspaper saying that the survivors of this pileup died in a fatal wood chipper accident. So, since technically not in the movie, I wouldn't say it's canon, they're dead, but nobody survives these movies. And the one time that someone did, they got killed off in between movies by a brick, and then the other one was blown up in said follow-up movie. So I don't think their odds are that high at all, personally. Aside from those couple of callbacks, though, this film like very much stands on its own, and it's very fast-paced compared to the second one, which I mentioned it in my previous video that I had more fun talking about it than I actually did watching it. This one, I was so into from like beginning to end. I very much enjoyed the side characters. They didn't have depth, but they were so funny to me throughout it. I think they were very well cast. The kills in it are super cool. And our two leads are very well matched, and they have amazing chemistry with one another too. We have Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who might as well be a modern day spring queen. And then we also have Ryan Merriman, who is kind of like an almost love interest for Mary Elizabeth Winstead. It never really goes anywhere. It's kind of a will they, won't they that fizzles out. Unlike in the first Final Destination movie with Clear and Alex, I think it is done to better effect here, and I find the two of them more believable. As much as I love Clear's character in that first film, I don't think her character was written the deepest, which the characters in this franchise aren't, so what am I expecting? Like, we're here for the kills. Originally, Mary Elizabeth Winstead actually tried out to be in Final Destination 2, but wasn't cast for the film, and then was casted in this one. Amazing choice. And two, apparently, both her and Ryan were in the ring too, and I was able to find the scene that Ryan was in. He is literally the opening kill. I have no clue who Mary Elizabeth Winstead played in that movie, so like, if you guys know, you should comment down below, because I really don't want to rewatch that movie. I didn't like it, so if you guys remember, let me know. Originally, our two leads of the film would have been different. I had Mary Elizabeth Winstead chosen as Wendy, but Kevin was actually supposed to be played by Zac Efron, believe it or not. And then even Ashley Tisdale jumped into the mix, and she was supposed to play Ashley, the popular girl that ends up in the tanning bed. And this would have been a completely different movie if those two ended up being in it. And I'm glad they weren't, because I love Ryan Merriman, and I love the girl who was cast as Ashley as well. I think her and Ashlyn are super funny and probably my favorite side characters in this franchise, right next to Billy from Final Destination 1. But we like so missed an opportunity to have like a Disney style horror movie. Honestly, I would have loved to see the two of them side by side in a Final Destination movie together, but I can understand why they turned this down. They ended up doing High School Musical instead, and can you really blame them? One of my biggest memories about this movie too, and I think a lot of people can agree with me, is the special features that were on the DVD. When you would go to click play on it, you would be brought this prompt up and it would be like, watch the regular movie or watch the choose your own death version. And it was so much fun. It was like this choose your own adventure thing, and like every so often while you're watching the DVD, you need your remote, because there would be 2 different questions that would pop up on the screen and you had to click one or the other. And depending on your choice, like a character could live or die in a different way than what they were supposed to. And it was just such a fun thing. And it's like one of my biggest memories of this film as well too. The opening premonition, though I don't think it is as effective as the first 2 films, it is still a really good premonition. And it very much like has impacted me, because I don't do carnival rides. They freak me out. I'm not a fan of heights, and I wouldn't be surprised if this movie plays into that fear just a little bit, of like that loss of control of what if something goes wrong. And to the tanning bed, every single time I see a tanning bed, I immediately think of that song, and I start imagining all the way things could go wrong in a tanning bed, which is probably a good thing because skin cancer is a thing. So I'm dodging a bullet on that one, I suppose. If you guys haven't seen this movie, go watch it. 110%. I'm going to delve into all the spoilers for it. So if you think this movie sounds interesting, go check it out. I highly recommend it. It's on HBO Max right now, along with all the other films in the franchise. And if you just enjoy dumb, fun movies, this is that. It's super entertaining. I feel like it's very much go, 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 go. On top of it too, the kills are a lot of fun, but there's so many dialogue choices throughout this movie that are so enjoyable and poorly written, but acted so seriously that the in-between of the kills ends up being fun too.
I mean, if I had seen their whatever humanity, I wouldn't have felt the pressure to look so good. Impress Franklin Cheeks.
It's kind of a dark comedy in many ways, I would describe it as. But there is going to be spoilers in this video. It is an older movie. So with that spiel out of the way, let's talk about the film. As I keep stating, I enjoy so many of the side characters in this. They're very stereotypical, but it's so much fun seeing these stereotypes and the way that they're played. The 2 standouts for me, as I've already said, were Ashlyn and Ashley. I think they're so funny. They very much remind me of a time capsule for the 2000s with their fake tans and their like ugly track suits. They're like the crushed velvet. It makes me think of Paris Hilton and House of Wax, which I think she would have been friends with them too. She was kind of a shallow bitch as well in that movie.
Slay. That's hot. Loves it. Yas. It's living.
Those 2 constantly are dropping these hilarious one-liners throughout the film, even after the roller coaster accident happens and they're going to graduation. They decide they need to go get tan because they need to look their best for all those dead kids that just aren't able to graduate, and they would want them to look good for them because they can. And I just love how wannabe fake deep that is.
That was so nice of us.
And 2, you have Frankie, who is Tool, but the actor that plays him plays it so like seriously and playfully at the same time that it's so much fun watching him. And the way both Ashley and Ashlyn riff off of him when they do get stuck with him is very hilarious too. I love how quick they are to call him out for his sexism. And I love that he tries to act like he's self-aware of his sexism when he's very much not. But to lead this film is, as I was saying earlier, both Wendy and Kevin. And this movie, I think, works so well because of their 2 performances. I love the growth these 2 characters go through. They start out as not liking each other at the beginning of the film. The only reason they know each other is because, like, his girlfriend was friends with her, her boyfriend was friends with him. They wouldn't have hung out otherwise. It's outright stated at one point in the film. But it goes from them going through this awful experience and then having to discover everything that's going on with death, and eventually it brings them closer together. And like I said earlier, it feels almost romantic in a way, and I know I talked about in the first Final Destination movie where I was okay that they cut out that romance subplot in that film. I thought it was cheesy. I would have actually enjoyed if they would have pursued that in this movie, because I actually did think those two were really cute, and it seemed like they genuinely cared about each other as the film went along. And that's one thing that was constantly praised about this movie as well. When you looked at reviews for it, people tore this movie apart, or I should say critics tore this movie apart, because it was just an excuse for good kills. One thing they did praise over and over again was Mary Elizabeth Winstead's performance in this film. She does a very good job. Even there's bad lines that she has to read, but she does it so well that it becomes instantly iconic. Like this SpongeBob scene, like forever cracks me up whenever I think about it.
SpongeBob lives underwater.
It's so sad that you know that.
Speaking of the kills in this movie as well, they are done so well and to great effect. Obviously, the most iconic one is the tanning bed. It is the first one that we get after the premonition, and I was so disappointed when it came because I realized how much I loved both the Ashleys. I thought they were amazing, but they just had to die apparently. But their scene, I was very pleasantly surprised how well the special effects aged in that. I actually found myself cringing a little bit, even though I've seen it before, when they're in the tanning bed and you see their skin start to bubble up and everything. Like, it's a very effective scene, and there's a reason why there is a stigma behind tanning beds, and it's because of this movie. And again, too, the fact that this franchise was able to pull off something so memorable and iconic the third movie in. Like, I give massive props to this movie. I can't stress this enough. Final Destination did not change the horror genre by any means, but it is very prevalent in pop culture. And with a whole bunch of people's anxieties and fears, people know these scenes, and I can never give enough credit for that. Here's to hoping the Space Needle in Final Destination 6 does something similar to that. But even though that ended up being the most iconic death and my favorite diva bitches ended up being gone from the movie, we still had plenty of kills that were very well done throughout. Even Frankie's death, he ends up getting like car motor to the back of his head, and his head like explodes, and when you see it like launch forward after the fans start to go off again once the wreck's over, it looks really cool. You have these two emo punk kids, and both of their deaths are really fun. But one of them is at like a Home Depot, and she ends up falling backwards straight into a nail gun, and it starts shooting into her head over and over again. And I just want to throw this out there. There is a clip from the Dead Meat podcast where they do this game where you have to guess the kill in a movie by just hearing the audio. And I immediately knew I saw this movie way too much as a kid, because the moment I heard the squeak of those shoes, I knew exactly what movie it was. And I was like screaming at my phone low-key, being like, oh my god, it's this one.
Sorry, what?
Sounds like someone's skidding their heels.
It sounds like
against the
is this in a gym?
Yeah, right.
No.
Yeah, it sounds like.
As far as I don't know, it's not.
It sounds like squeaky
Yeah.
tennis shoes or something.
Then you have the other emo guy at the end of the movie. This giant sign like falls over and crushes him, and like half his body gets split off and comes flying out, and he's still like giving the middle finger at the end, and it's so funny. I love it. And you very much feel it more in this movie as I'm talking about these kills, that each scene is just building up to the next kill. It doesn't work as well at all when it's so choreographed for the audience, but in this film, it's just fun because it never misses a beat. And like I said too, the in-between scenes, there's all this like really cheesy dialogue that like builds into it that just makes it more fun to watch. And it's a good popcorn teen flick is how I feel about it at the end of the day. There's like little inclusions too that I think are genius. The car radio playing There's Someone Walking Behind You is a super fun inclusion. Every once in a while, I randomly get that song stuck in my head because of this movie. That alone, though, just adds to the playfulness of this movie and like shows you that it's not trying to be serious and it's not taking itself seriously. It's just trying to have fun, and it wants you to have fun with it too. And I think it's done to very good effect because you can still tell that they were trying to make an entertaining movie by the end of this. One thing that I kind of want to critique a little bit, that's kind of a twist at the end, a very poorly done twist. Throughout the film, you have all these pictures that were taken at the amusement park, and each picture hints at how each character is going to die throughout the movie, whether it be something that was in the background of a shot with them, or if it was something bad that happened with the picture. Like, there was a picture of both Ashlyn and Ashley that's all out of focus, and there's like red coming up, and then that hinted at them burning to death in the tanning bed, just as an example. But there was a picture showing that there was 2 other people on the roller coaster that they didn't know who they were. And that makes no sense to me whatsoever, because you don't even really see them while they're on the roller coaster. And it ends up being Wendy's sister, and it is the most forced twist. And I have to admit, when you find out that it was her sister and her sister's friend that had snuck onto the roller coaster, but for some reason just chose not to tell anybody that they were also on the ride, the moment that comes out, her friend dies. And it's so funny because I think it's supposed to be shocking, but the character had no lines whatsoever. And I know she had a name, but I cannot tell you what said name was. She was very much there just to have an extra body for the kill count at the end of this. One thing I always kind of find funny in these films too is, for some reason, death always waits a few months before finally getting our protagonists from throughout the movie and goes and kills them. It happens in the first one, it happens in the second one, and it ends up happening in future sequels. It's honestly something that you could throw on a Final Destination bingo card 110%.
Death is fucking complicated.
It's like 5 months later, and all of our characters end up going on a subway, and Wendy has a premonition that they're all going to die. But when she wakes up from the premonition, they're all on the subway, there's no way to escape. And essentially it's hinted at, or told without showing you, that all of them are dead and they weren't able to escape death that time around. And I have to say, I do really enjoy the subway scene. I find it disappointing that we have yet more characters in this franchise that weren't able to escape, but at the end of the day, who can escape death itself? Like, we all gotta face it sometime, right? Test screening showed this other scene where all the characters are at this 4th of July event that does still happen in the theatrical cut of the film. But originally, after the goth guy gets crushed by the sign, they all think that they defeated death, and it ends with the camera that hinted at everyone's deaths on the ground, and then it opens up and flashes. Test audiences weren't really a fan of that ending. They didn't really think it made sense. I personally agree. I don't think it's the worst ending on the planet. There is other endings in this franchise that I think are much worse. I'm looking at you, Hallmark ending for FD1. The ending they did end up tacking onto the film, the whole subway scene, is a very fun scene. I kind of wish that it wasn't just a deleted scene that showed Officer Burke and Kimberly dying from the second film with the newspaper that flies by. I think that's a fun Easter egg that could have been left in the film. And it was only a couple seconds long, so I don't really know why that was left on the cutting room floor. And on top of it too, like, might as well do it. I mean, you're never gonna see those characters again. Like, just saying. Another thing I want to mention too is, you guys probably have noticed that in this video, I have not talked about Tony Todd at all and given him the praise that he deserves. That's because he plays a very small role in this, and though I find it disappointing that we actually don't get to see the coroner or have a scene with him with our new set of survivors, I am very much glad that they still had him in this film. They had him voice over the devil statue that was over the roller coaster, and there's a scene on set subway I was just talking about where he's the conductor talking over the intercom.
Next stop is the end of the line.
And I'm really glad that they still had him in the film as an Easter egg to others and kept him included, even if he wasn't shown on screen. But damn, do I wish that we got some more screen time with him, because I want so much more character growth for him. And I'm very much hoping, since the new one is his last film, that we get those scenes, because I've read articles that talk about how we're going to get more backstory with the coroner, and I really do want that. And I think it's an amazing send-off for Tony Todd to end in this franchise. It's almost poetic in a way. I don't know if that's dark or cryptic to say, but that's kind of how I feel about it. And today I'm going to be covering the Final Destination, not Final Destination 4. We are going to start this review off very, very strong with my disdain towards this movie, even with the title, The Final Destination. Like, there's been choices that were made for this film that are so baffling to me. This review is probably going to be the most negative review I have released on this channel so far. But God, I'm going to tear this movie a new one because it is not good. This is not a good movie. I am so glad the franchise did not end on this entry. So far, every single video I've done in this series, I've talked about some of the behind the scenes info that I found. I didn't feel the need to look into any of that for this movie because studio, the producers, they didn't care about this movie, so therefore I don't care to do research on their movie. In fact, I'm just going to take it at face value for what it is, the hot garbage that it ended up being. Most research that I did for this film was producer Craig Perry did a whole bunch of interviews for this film and was oddly full of himself when he was trying to sell it. And I will just flip some of that stuff in here and see, like, you guys should let me know if you agree with anything he said about this movie.
I am bringing a love of the horror movie genre. I'm also bringing, I think, the full realization of the 3 movies and what we learned on them in one movie that delivers everything the fans would want, but in fabulous 3D. People need to see the 4th Final Destination, because if you think you've seen the first 3, you haven't, until you've seen the Final Destination movie in high-def 3D.
So this would be closure?
This is closure. This is the last Final Destination. We wanted to go out with a 3D bang, and we're doing it. And I think the audience is going to get everything they asked for, plus a little more dimension than they ever imagined.
Blah, 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 blah.
Now, all my other videos, I warn for spoilers, and I have recommend to go watch the movie. If you guys are a completionist and you want to see every single Final Destination movie, check this one out. I don't think there's going to be callbacks to this film in any of the other movies. I think they're going to pretend it didn't exist, and we should keep it that way because they did not do a good job on this film, and I can't even blame the actors because, yes, their acting is bad, but the bad dialogue in this is just so flat and boring, and none of the characters have any depth to them whatsoever. So what was there for the actors to really work with? As I get into this review, there's going to be one character that I actually enjoyed in this movie, and even him I found a little bit lackluster, but I really do think that actor was doing his damnedest to try to do a good job with the crap that he was handed. I suppose to start this movie off, you guys should all know, and as you already know if you've seen this movie, it is in miraculous 3D, and it constantly just has stuff getting thrown at the camera, even though producer Craig Perry said he didn't want a film like that. That's what this is. It's just random shit constantly getting thrown at the camera, whether it be a cork popping at the camera or a really bad CGI kill. There's always something flying at you in this movie and it doesn't look good. And I don't know what it was about 3D cameras for cheap horror movies back in the late 2000s, early 2010s. Even Saw 3D has this effect where Saw 3D also did not look good and everything just looked super CGI and fake. And even for this movie, the scenes where they used practical effects, they might as well not have, because by the time they put CGI over it to make it 3D or whatever, you can't even tell there was practical effects in the first place. And that's what this movie is riddled with. And there's so many scenes throughout this film as well where I felt like they were onto something, where they had good ideas, but very rarely, if ever, were there scenes where they actually executed it properly. So you're going to hear very few praises for those things, because more often than not, when they would do a build-up for something that was a good kill, it just fell flat almost immediately. Starting with the opening premonition, you have an first three films, very relatable instances of stuff that everybody's done or been to. You have a plane, you have the pile-up, you have the roller coaster. It's very feasible things. NASCAR is not. NASCAR is such a niche and makes it immediately unrelatable. Another thing too that was kind of frustrating is all the movies, they jump into the premonition pretty quickly, but you get some enjoyment out of what little bit you get of each character before we get to the actual premonition. This film, all the characters are super flat, unlikable, and boring. I don't even know any of their names. Even the lead, he's so forgettable. You know nothing about him, but when it jumps into the premonition, you don't care. You really don't when this huge pileup happens and everybody just starts dying. You're just sitting like, oh, okay, yeah, that's cool. And like, there was one scene in it where I was just like, oh, this is really well done. They're doing a good job with it, where you have this mother that is in the stands and all these people are like trampling over her as they're rushing to get out of there. And that is such a horrifying concept. And if the scene would have ended there, I would have loved her kill. But it's Final Destination. They need to make it over the top. I can understand that. But having that car engine fall on her looked like such garbage. I don't know what they were thinking and like how they were able to look at that and be like, oh yeah, that's good. Put it in the movie. We're gonna sell tickets for that. People are gonna buy it. Yeah. It's even more painful watching the movie all these years later and not watching it in 3D and watching it in 2D, because I know damn well it did not look good in 3D, but in 2D, like, it is like exhausting throughout the film when you see all this stupid shit constantly going on. That was obviously shot for these 3D effects, and it's not charming and fun like in something like Friday the 13th Part 3, where the bad effects like have aged it to where it's iconic in its own right. This one's just bad. Right after our lead character has his premonition as well, you have the scene of him freaking out and everybody getting dragged out and surviving the accident. And whereas in the first three movies they did a very good job of doing it, this was just marking the slot off the bingo card, because you just have these random characters leaving for no reason. Like, there's no justification for them to leave. They just dip out with him, and it makes no sense why they would. It was only to do that so we could have our body count for the film, rather than trying to do some kind of decent explanation or any kind of writing at all. This will be the only praise I really have for this film. Once the accident is over, you get this title card and title sequence that is really fun, because when this came out, it was supposed to be the last Final Destination movie. So throughout it, they had like this 3D animated X-ray scene that shows all the deaths from throughout these films, and like, oh, do you remember that? Oh, that's so much fun. And like, yeah, it is fun seeing those things again. But it immediately reminds you of, I wish I was watching any one of those movies instead of this one. You don't want to do that in the middle of your movie and remind people just how bad you did. Aside from the beginning premonition, we also get all these mini premonitions, which isn't new to this franchise by any means. Each one of the original movies before this one has done them as well. In the first one, you have the scene of Devin seeing the bus in the glass before it hits Terry. In the second one, Kimberly just randomly has visions, and they're like little snippets of stuff that's going to happen in the future. The third one, you have the camera. They were all very cool, done differently, done well. This one is just like this like weird mismatch of CGI garbage, and it just pops out at the screen to go, wow, 3D! And I can't stand it. And it just reminds you just how cheap this movie is. And I'm going to say that so many times in this review, because that's what it is. It's a cheap movie. Normally I would point out some of the characters I like. There's only one character I like, so we're going to talk about him. And then we're going to go into the kills, because his character kind of leads into the kills. But you have George. He is the only character that has any remote amount of depth to him. You find out that he was an alcoholic, and he's the reason that his wife and his daughter passed away, because he was drinking while driving. I very much enjoyed his character. I think the actor did a good job with what he was given. And it's the only point of this film where it seems like the writers remembered, like, oh yeah, we need to write these as people instead of just kills, we should just do one of them and then everybody will be happy. But like, let's not make it our main protagonist. Let's make it a side character, so then when they inevitably die off later in the movie, we're going to have nothing for anyone to care about at all. Anyways, moving on from that spiel, the first kill that we get is admittedly kind of fun in a dark, humorous kind of way. It is one of the only kills I enjoyed in this film, but you have this racist that survived the crash, and when he was pulled out with everybody else, his wife got left behind, and he blames George for it, and even ends up dropping the hard R on George for his wife being dead. Our two main characters end up jumping in though, saving the day and getting rid of him.
Kids, don't be racist.
And later it cuts to him in front of George's house with a cross that he's going to put in his front yard and set on fire, which ends up leading to him getting caught in the chain of his tow truck while Why Can't We Be Friends starts playing on the radio, and he gets dragged down the road and is lit on fire. That is so much fun. I enjoyed that. The preceding explosion after that is admittedly less good, but as a Final Destination kill goes, that one I would 110% say is the best one in this film. It is a good kill. I will give them credit where credit is due, because there's not going to be much more of that throughout this. Jumping to another kill in this movie, you have the mom I mentioned earlier that got crushed by the engine. She goes to the hairstylist and is getting a haircut or whatever, and this is one of those moments where I mentioned earlier that this film has little inklings of, oh, this could have been good, but then they just botched it so hard, because all the build-up during that scene is so much fun, where you see the pump on her chair is busted, you see the rickety fan, you see the can of hairspray slowly going into the curling iron or whatever, and like all that stuff ends up going off. Her chair collapses down, the fan falls, the hairspray blows up, but it does nothing, and it just makes you feel like Death is this bumbling oaf that doesn't know what he's doing half the time and isn't as smart as like it should be, but it ends up leading to her lackluster death of her looking at her sons and being like,
I've got my eye on you two.
And a rock goes through her eye and kills her. I am so sorry, Final Destination 2, that I made fun of your foreshadowing for the lottery guy's death for his eye getting gouged out. That was so much better written and subtle than this. Like, I take everything back. That was an unfair criticism. It was at this point in the movie, and I even wrote in my notes as I was watching it, that these aren't characters. They're just walking body bags that spout exposition. That's all they do. We even have a scene of our lead character talking to his girlfriend and his two friends and like explaining to them like Death's design and how, oh yeah, like these kids that survived Flight 180, they went through it too. And I think that the way that we survive this is that we, like, Death's gonna come for us in the order that we died in the premonition, but also if we're able to avoid that death, it'll skip us and go to the next person that was on the list before eventually coming back to us. But like, it wasn't earned. How did they learn that? It's just this random exposition dump that seemingly happens out of nowhere, and it just immediately angered me. And again, it's just like everybody leaving with him after his premonition at the beginning of the film. It isn't telegraphed very well. It's just written in there because that's something that happens in a Final Destination movie, and they gotta have it here. And I am so glad that they didn't have Tony Todd to do that exposition dump like he normally does, because the way he does it is so iconic. I am so glad that he was not in this film. I don't know what his reasonings were for not being in this movie, but thank God he avoided it, because this is the worst one, and it didn't need to be in his filmography. Shortly after our exposition dump, we have the two friends disappear and split up from our lead and his girlfriend, and they realize, oh no, they were next on the list and they died at the same time. I don't know which one was first, so we're gonna split up and go find them. And the only reason they left in the first place was to kick off the kill. It is so choreographed, but again, not to good effect. There's been other films in this franchise Final Destination 3, where it's just working up to the next kill, but at least it's fun. And like, it knows what it is. It's trying to have fun and entertain you. This one is just trying to make money. Moving on from that, though, you end up getting this scene again where I kind of wish it was the kill that we got in this scene, because both are decent, honestly. You have this scene where the girl goes through the car wash and she gets stuck in it. The car starts filling up with water, and it is super eerie. And I think if it were in a better Final Destination movie, if it were actually the kill actually was successful, people would remember that death, because that is such an iconic idea. She ends up surviving this though, because our main guy's girlfriend is able to get there and save the day, and then she just kind of exists in the rest of the movie until the end because reasons. But then you get to our eye candy of the film, the ironically the only one I remember the name of, but that's, like I said, eye candy. He's hot. But we follow Hunt to this pool, and he drops his lucky coin down the drain or whatever, and he jumps into the pool, and it starts draining, and he gets his ass caught on the drain, and essentially it sucks all of his organs out of him through his, yeah. And like, oof. It's scenes like that though where I'm like, you guys had ideas for fun stuff. Like, I think you guys should have sat on your script more though and like reworked it. For some reason, because they saved the girl from the car wash, they're convinced that they beat death, that it's all over, and you're just kind of sitting there like, this is stupid. Their point is even pushed further because George, our only likable character, knows he's next on the list. He tries to commit so death can't get him, essentially. And he even like throws out there that he's been trying all day or whatever, and it just hasn't worked. And like, none of the characters think that's odd. They're just like, oh yeah, pop a cork. We're good. We beat death, da-da-da-da-da. But then, plot twist, apparently, you have another guy that survived and is currently at the hospital who was supposed to die, that was also saved because of the premonition or whatever. All builds up to this final scene that is this premonition, and it also leads to our only likable character, George, dying very unceremoniously. He gets tarried. That is so frustrating to me. This whole end scene, though, takes place in a premonition initially. This movie theater explodes, and with the budget and the choices made in this film, I was extremely shocked that we didn't end up hearing a Wilhelm scream in the middle of all these explosions and like bodies getting thrown all over the place. In fact, you know what? I think this deserves a Wilhelm scream for this movie. It's on that level of good, apparently. So let's just add that in.
Find your way to the exit, move to the exit, remain calm, everything's gonna be okay.
The only thing that I enjoyed from this premonition that I thought was done well, where you have the main guy and his girlfriend on this escalator, and it breaks apart, and she ends up getting pulled into all the gears and getting torn apart. It's a super cool kill, but immediately after that happens, he wakes up from the premonition, and George still dies. He isn't able to turn around and save him, so there still goes our only likable character in the movie. Our main character ends up going to said movie theater, and this scene that's supposed to be super tense where he's trying to stop the fire that causes the explosion in the theater that's going to kill both his girlfriend and her friend is not suspenseful at all, because you don't like any of the three of them whatsoever. So he literally has a nail gun like shoot him in the arm, and he's like sitting there trying to like reach over and like grab this freaking board, and like you don't care that he's trying to set off the sprinkler to stop the fire. You kind of just want it to happen because you don't like that. Obviously though, he ends up saving the day and is able to stop the sprinkler and stop the fire, and just like in every other Final Destination movie, because we gotta cross things off the checklist, we have them a few months later at a coffee shop, and instead of giving us actual kills, we get Final Destination's take on a Mortal Kombat fatality scene. And honestly, it's not good, but somehow that is better than the original ending they had planned for this movie. I can already tell you a huge spoiler for my next ranking. The newest movie and the next one are in no way, shape, or form going to be worse than this one. This is at the bottom of the list. There is no argument. It's already there. And unfortunately, this is the worst entry, but for some reason, and I mentioned this in my part 2 video because I had to fact check myself, audiences let this film be the highest grossing in the franchise. Like, okay, I guess 3D gimmick really did work. It put money in their pockets, but whatever. And today I'm going to be covering Final Destination 5. If you've been following me throughout this series, you'll know that this is the penultimate episode. All we'll have left to cover after this one is Final Destination Bloodlines once that comes out. So this is really exciting for me because it'll be the first franchise that I've been able to fully cover on my new channel. And to backtrack a little bit, my book taste as a kid, I think, showed penultimate. Lemony Snicket, he was an OG, guys. Getting back onto subject, though, this used to be one of my favorite series, and rewatching it, I have found that I haven't enjoyed some of these sequels as much as I used to. There's really only 2 that have been huge standouts to me for this franchise as being genuinely good movies. I guess that's a bit of a spoiler for this film. It still stands, though, as a return to form for the franchise, this one. So even with the qualms that I have with this film, I am glad that for a brief period of time that this franchise did end on a somewhat high note versus what the original ending was. But before I get into this review, as you guys know, I like saying some of the behind the scenes information that I found, and I didn't dig up a whole lot for this one. There was one that I found that I honestly found to be pretty funny. If you guys remember, like, the whole, like, meme in the Scream fandom of everybody feeling like it was a missed opportunity to have Scream 5 be named 5 Cream. Final Destination also had a chance to do that, apparently. For a brief period of time, they made it official that instead of calling it Final Destination 5, it was actually going to be titled 5 Null Destination. And damn, we missed out on that, because that is some stupid marketing, and I am here for that, baby. Another fun thing that I found too when I was researching behind the scenes stuff for this film is Miles Fisher. He plays Peter in the film, one of our lead characters. He also is a musician, apparently, and before this movie came out, he did a little bit of promo for it and had all of our lead survivors of the film in a music video, and it's Saved by the Bell style, and it is essentially Saved by the Bell, but if Final Destination happened in this school. And I watched it before this video. I found out that it even existed because of Wikipedia. And, like, thank you, Wikipedia, because I didn't know that this was a thing. And it came out before the trailer even dropped for the movie, and it was a hint to the movie coming out. And at the end of the video, it even ends with the last 2 survivors of the video getting carried by a bus, and the bus says Final Destination. I love promos like that step out of the norms. Another thing too that I wanted to talk about is Tony Todd finally returns as the coroner Bloodworth, and it is so exciting to have him back. That on its own levitates this movie up further for me on my ranking because of that. Tony Todd, like, I've talked so much about him throughout this entire series and, like, all these praises of him, and that's not going to end in this video. He brought so much to this franchise, even with the little bit of screen time that he had, and overall stands as the closest thing that we get to an embodiment of, like, death in this. Like, that's not what he is, but, like, he gives that energy to me, and I'm going to talk about that more later in the video, but I'm going to insert a little clip of him talking about, like, being behind the scenes and making this movie right about now.
I mean, everybody knows you're the person that
they got to meet eventually, right? I mean, what's it like working with Steve, with the director on the fifth one?
First of all, I was a kid when I got the call, and I still am a kid every time I get cast, which is like once a week. No, I'm kidding. But I've never worked a 3D process before, not live, and that was kind of intimidating for me. People say I intimidate other things. I didn't know what that was about, and all the time it just seemed like it takes forever. It's meticulous. Like Emma said earlier, if there's a hair in the face, it's coming at you, has to be moved, and usually at first it felt like it was inorganic. I come from the theater, so it's all about moment to moment and organicness. So once I was able to put that past, and I realized that Steve loved that side of it as much as I loved the craft of acting, then it was a way to meet in the middle ground.
As you guys just heard in the clip, this film was also shot for 3D, just like the original film was, and if you saw my last video, you know how much that angered me. I will assure you guys here that their 3D in this film is done to much better effect more often than not, but I do still have my problems with it here and there, but nowhere in here is it like as glaringly bad as in the original. You don't have stupid shit getting thrown at you constantly. Really, the only time you see the 3D is for the kills, which makes way more sense to me than having a random fork pop into the camera, but I digress. Really, the only thing that sticks out to me about the 3D is I don't think it probably looked that bad back when this movie came out. In fact, I remember when this movie first came out, I remember my dad actually pirating it for me so I could watch it as a kid, and I remember thinking how badass it looked. I think the CGI for some of the 3D kills we get is a little lackluster and leaves you wanting, but like I said, it's nowhere near as like glaringly bad and like pulls you out of the movie like the previous installment did, so I will give them credit where credit is due. I don't have a whole lot to say before I want to get into spoilers. This is an older movie. I've said this in all my videos. If you guys haven't seen it, then stop the video, go watch it, check it out. As I've also stated, they're all on HBO Max right now, so if you haven't watched them, then like, what are you doing? Just go watch them, man. Like, that's all I have to say about that. But with that out of the way, we're going to talk about our new cast of victims in this one. Now, just like in the previous installment, I think that they improved it just a little bit, but I still think that there's room for growth, and I hope it's something that isn't a problem in the next film, but I'm not the biggest fan of the new set of characters. Whereas in the first three, I found there to be like gimmicks with each character, and they had like a certain kind of archetype that they fell into, or stereotype, I guess I would say. They still felt like fun characters to watch between the kills. Yes, they were flat, but they were still interesting to see on your screen. The previous film was not that. They were all boring and unlikable except for one character that was passable. This one, I would say that how I felt about George in the previous film, I feel that way really about all the characters in this one. They have little moments where each one shines, and like there's funny bits of dialogue they throw in there for them to say that I did admittedly crack up at. Like, you have like Olivia walking up to Candace at the beginning of the film and dropping this line on her where she says,
"You know, if you want to get rid of that baby fat, you should try the gym."
It's not fat. They're called tits.
We even have like another scene where like Isaac's on the bus and he's trying to like jerk off his boss's ego, and he looks at him and he's just like, "Bald's the new black, sir. Bald is the new black." Like, it's stuff like that that I think is funny, and I wish they would have pushed into those types of moments throughout this film a little bit more, because you see them throughout like a good chunk of this movie, but it doesn't like fully embrace them like they did in Final Destination 3, for example. I think I very much enjoyed that darker comedy tone in a way that that film had. I don't know if anyone else views that movie that way, but that's kind of how I viewed it, and I wish more of the sequels in this franchise would kind of do that. Another point in favor for this film, though it isn't the strongest point, for me is our two lead protagonists. Unlike in the previous film where I hated them to the point where I can't even tell you their names, plus I didn't feel the reason to even look up their names. As you would have seen in my last video, they were just there for the body count. In this one, you are following Sam, who has the premonition, and his girlfriend, Molly. And they have this whole subplot throughout the film where the movie starts out with like the two of them splitting up because he is this chef and he wants to go and do this apprenticeship over in Paris, and she doesn't want to go with him because she feels like he's holding him back from his dreams, so she decides to leave him. So throughout the movie, it's like them like deciding like whether or not they're going to get back together, especially after the awful events of the premonition. Aside from those two characters, you also have Peter, who is his best friend, and he's also in a relationship with the intern at his office, Candace. And that's another thing too with these characters. Unlike them being a group of like teenagers, essentially, this is a group of people that all knows each other, very similar to like the first and third one. They all work in this office building together, and that is something I will give a point in favor to this film. Is it's stuff like that that feels like little callbacks to like the roots of this franchise, and I do very much enjoy that. It really is a culmination of the previous 4 films in universe, and as the movie goes on, they continue with like little subtle callbacks, and I'll point them out here and there as I get to them. Aside from that though, I'm not really going to get into any of the other characters. I don't find it that important. We'll talk about them more when we get to the kills, I suppose. Now, to kick things off, the thing that's in every Final Destination film, what makes a Final Destination movie a Final Destination movie, is the bridge collapse. I do enjoy this premonition a lot. I actually think it's very frightening, and it also does kind of like low-key touch back on to like those primal fears that this franchise is so good for that the last one forgot about. This one seems to have picked that back up because this is yet a very relatable thing. Everybody has gone across the bridge, let alone everybody at some point, more likely than not, has been on a bridge that's been under construction while you're crossing it. So like, I will admit there's been times where even like I have gone across bridges and like I've had little inklings in the back of my head because of this movie. So that's something alone that I can give huge credit for this scene alone. And the way that it's choreographed and done and shot, I think is very well done, excellently paced when you have all the characters trying to escape. There are little drawbacks in there for me. There's a couple moments where like the CGI does not look the best when you get to like Candace falling off of the bridge and she ends up getting impaled on a boat. The way her guts shoot up looks a little wonky to me, which I feel like if I would have seen this in 3D, it wouldn't have bothered me as much, especially if I would have seen it back in the day when it came out in 3D. I think that it probably would have looked pretty cool, especially for the time. Now I think it looks a little hokey. And there's also another shot with Olivia where she's like falling off the bridge and you can very much tell it's green screened in. Where I can very much give an exception to that though, is the fact that the whole scene of her like trying to cross over the girder is very, very suspenseful, and they do a good job on that. And anything that I have a problem with in this scene at all the way going to another bad 3D scene of our lead character's body getting split and his whole body going into the camera, like I can ignore all of that entirely because the way that boss dies the moment the tar hits his skin is like, ooh, that is yet another moment where I feel like the special effects have aged incredibly well because ouch. Like, honestly, like, I feel like getting any death outside of the premonition for him was better than having that be his actual death, because fuck all that. Another thing, too, that's really cool about this premonition that hasn't happened in any other film, and it kind of surprises me that it took them 5 movies to come up with this idea, because I do think it's a very smart idea, is when everybody's trying to run across the bridge, Peter does get Molly across safely, and even in the premonition, she survives, and she doesn't end up dying on this bridge collapse. And that's something that we haven't gotten in any of these other movies, where you have one person with our group of survivors that isn't actually on death's list that's safe. And I thought that was a really cool addition to add to like change things up in this a little bit. I just realized that I called Sam Peter, so ignore that, please, you guys. But anyways, after the premonition happens, Sam gets a whole bunch of people off the bridge, just like in all the other movies, where you have to have your cast of characters for death to hunt down and slaughter, essentially. Right after the scene, you go to a funeral, and we have our introduction back to Tony Todd, and I have to say that he only appears in 2 scenes in this movie, which is more than he has had in any other film. Usually he only shows up for 1 scene, so like, good on you, Final Destination 5. When he shows up, he very much takes up the scene, and I think that any film in this franchise that has had him in it, even though he has that little bit of screen time, it adds way more points to that film for me, because he is such an ominous presence, and he always does an exposition dump, but Tony Todd delivers it so well with such a great performance for a very stripped character that doesn't, like, that's very bare bones. Like, massive props to him for making Bloodworth like this iconic character that's almost the base of this franchise in many ways. But he appears in 2 scenes, and we learn this new information eventually that if you kill somebody while you're on death's list, you can take their life that they were supposed to live, and death will no longer be after you, which puts this little extra bit of mystery into the movie about whether or not somebody's actually going to go through with it and kill someone. That was a really cool addition, because you don't usually get that villain in these movies other than death coming after them. More often than not, you don't have the characters spiraling down into madness where they're lashing out at everyone else and then actually trying to hurt them. And we'll get into that later about what exactly I mean by all that. But we're going to start off with the kills before I jump into that. Now, the kills in this movie, some of them range from really good to being kind of and cartoony or just forgettable. None of them are anywhere near as god-awful as they were in the last film, though. So I just want to make that more than clear right now. And the first kill that we get after the bridge collapse is easily the standout in this film for me, and I think it is for so many people. And a huge part of why it's a standout for me is the whole build-up to it. It is so tense and uncomfortable to watch, because you have Candace, who I mentioned earlier, who is Peter's girlfriend. She is a gymnast, and she is training, and as she's training, she's like going across this balance beam. She's like going up on the bars and doing those like flips that they do, and as that's all going on, like, you have a giant fan above the balance beam, and water's like dripping off of it and creating a puddle in like normal Final Destination fashion. Like, that's always got to work with like a water drip, doesn't he? Then you also have a screw fall off, and it lands like perfectly on the balance beam, and that is the most uncomfortable thing to watch as you see her feet like go back and forth across that balance beam, because all I could think about was how painful that would be to step on that. And then eventually, when it does happen and it's not her, it's another girl that does it, she steps on that screw, which, ouch, and then she falls back and like knocks a whole bunch of powder into the air that ends up making Candace get like disoriented, and she goes flying off of those like spinning bars that I was just mentioning. And she ends up like falling on her stomach, and her whole like body just breaks apart, and it is so gnarly looking and so gross. But the screw alone, man, like, maybe she dodged a bullet by dying instead of standing on that screw. Like, hot take right there, but ouch, man, fucking ouch. A huge part of the reason that scene works for me is because of that build-up attention and the payoff for it too, with how gory that kill is. It's done expertly well. And then the next kill that we jump to, we have Isaac. He's the horn dog of this film. The last previous 3 installments have all had to have a dude whose entire personality is sex, so obviously they did it again here. I think that it's very funny how they handled him in this movie, because he goes to this massage parlor and he is being such a racist POS to all of these like Asian workers, and is trying to treat them like they're sex workers when they're not. And I love the scene of when the objectively hot one tells him that they're going to be taking him into get his massage or whatever. And then she like kind of leads him on like, yeah, I know just the person that can give you a happy ending, don't I? As he's getting massaged, he is like getting kind of into it, and then he realizes that like, oh shit, this is an old bitch. It's not the pretty girl. Where'd she go? And I just love how even like the older Asian woman is just mad talking shit about him and like isn't even speaking in English even though she can. She just wants to make him feel stupid essentially, and she doesn't want to deal with his fucking bullshit either. It's so hilarious.
You speak English.
She ends up giving him acupuncture and she steps away from the room, and this is another scene of ugh, like, I'm never doing acupuncture. I didn't need to see Final Destination to not want to get acupuncture, but this film, like, solidified that, like, screw all that. A fire breaks out in the room, and he falls over off the table, and all of the needles get, like, stabbed into his body, and he tries to pull them out, and, like, it is so gross and so real looking. Like, the effects for that have aged enormously well. This all culminates though eventually where he like falls on the floor and he thinks he like escaped the fire, to this giant Buddha statue like dropping on his head and his head just splatting even like all over the camera. It's a really funny scene. It's a really fun scene, and I'm really glad that this movie was able to like hit those dark comedic tones at certain points. Unlike the last installment that tried, I think this one actually did succeed at doing it when it was trying to do that. All the deaths in this movie, the last really memorable one for me, for them that I think marks as good, is Olivia's death. I think the build-up during it is very well executed, but then as it continues to go along, I do think that it kind of loses momentum a little bit once death actually starts taking action. Build-up is super tense throughout, but then once you actually get to like the laser going into her eye because she's getting LASIK or whatever, it does feel very cartoony to me, and I think the special effects have aged like a little more wonky for that one. I used to think that was like one of my favorite kills in the movie. I wouldn't put that there. It would be in top 3, I think, because like I said, I mentioned the 3 most memorable ones. But yeah, that's kind of where that goes for me. After that though, a lot of the other kills are very lackluster to me until we get towards the ending of the movie. The boss guy ends up having like a wrench go into his head like so quickly and so fast that like you're kind of like, oh yeah, he was a character in this movie, was he? We don't care though, because he very much is a very flat, boring character that we just don't care about. There's no, like, I have nothing else to say about him. Really, the only other kill that I think is worth mentioning is we have Nathan, who accidentally kills one of his coworkers, and they realize that, like, oh yeah, so death isn't going to be after him anymore. So Nathan is safe for the rest of the movie now. I haven't mentioned him really either because he hasn't really done a whole lot in the movie, so he's safe. Moving on from that, we eventually jump over to Peter, who would be next on Death's list, and he's very much grappling with the fact that Candace is now dead and struggling to be able to accept that. And while this is all going on, Molly and Sam are rekindling their relationship, getting back together, and even though Death's coming after them, Sam decides that he's going to take the internship and he wants Molly to come with him to Paris. So he takes her to the restaurant that he works at and tries to cook her a fancy meal. And this scene eventually leads to the climax of this film, where you have Peter coming to the restaurant and saying that he considered on killing somebody in the street and pushing them into the road, but he just couldn't bring himself to do it. But then he thought about how Molly deserved to survive, because even in the premonition, she survived. But to him, he doesn't get why that's fair or why that's okay, because why wasn't Candace allowed to survive? Why didn't she deserve to survive? And why did Molly's life matter more than everyone else's, is what his thought process is on it. And he grows this resentment towards her, and decides essentially that he wants to kill her and take her life because she got to live while no one else did. That was the exact thing that I was pointing out earlier, where I think that it adds another level of tension in this film that we hadn't had previously. I think it was done very, very well in this movie. This whole scene where they're running around the restaurant is very fun. You have Peter who's chasing after Molly, and he has a gun and he's trying to shoot her, and Sam is trying to jump in and stop it from happening. This is all going on. The detective that has been investigating the case of the bridge and all these strange deaths that have been happening throughout the movie jumps in, and yes, I didn't mention the detective earlier. It's a very nothing subplot, like, ignore it. We're not even gonna, like, care that much about it. But the detective ends up showing up, and Peter ends up killing the detective, and Molly tries to tell him, like, you got what you wanted, you don't have to kill me now, like, we're done, you can go. But then Peter decides, like, no, I still have to kill you because you saw me kill a federal agent, so I'm not getting the new life that I just literally killed for. I'm not spending the rest of it in prison. So he decides to still kill Molly. He eventually ends up cornering her with the gun, and he has full intention of killing her. Before he can, though, Sam jumps in and he kills Peter before he can get to Molly. And because he killed Peter, now he has Peter's life. The life that Peter took from the detective is now Sam's life, and he realizes that he gets to live and that death's no longer after him, and him and Molly can be happy together, and they don't have to worry about any of this happening, and they can still go to Paris together and be happy. If you ignored my point about spoilers earlier, definitely click away now before I say any of this, because this is what elevates this movie for me for being a good movie. This is exactly what knocks this movie up a notch for me to make it not this mediocre, forgettable film. When they get on the plane, there's a group of people freaking out on said plane, and they don't really know what's going on, and it cuts over, and you can tell it's like slightly older footage. You see our group of Flight 180 survivors getting pulled off of the plane as Alex is freaking out, and Molly and Sam are sitting there unsure of exactly what's going on or like what they just said. And it's at this moment that you realize this film isn't a sequel. It was a prequel the entire time that this film took place in the 90s. Our lead characters ended up on Flight 180, and before they can escape and before they can realize it was too late, they are on the plane and it's already up in the air, and they hear a stewardess telling somebody on the plane, like, oh, what were those kids freaking out about? And she ends up telling the person, like, oh, dumb kid said the plane was gonna blow up, like, can you believe that? And sure enough, the moment she says that, Peter and Molly look out the window and they see one of the engines is blown up, and the entire side of the plane ends up breaking off, and Molly goes flying out of the plane, gets sliced in half by the wing, and as Peter's sitting in there freaking out, the explosion happens, and just like in Final Destination 1 where you see Alex getting burned to a singe, you see Peter get burned to a singe in a very similar shot. And then it doesn't end there either, though, because Nathan, who I mentioned earlier, is sitting in a bar, and he is at the funeral of the guy that he accidentally killed. And as he's there, he discovers that guy was going to die any day now, apparently, because he had a blood clot in his brain. And just as he realizes that, one of the wheels from the plane ends up crashing into the bar, and the film ends with Nathan's dismembered hand shooting out at the screen, and cue the title card. At the time, it was a very great way to tie up this franchise and make everything feel like it came full circle. The only thing that sucks about this ending, though, honestly, is the logistics of it. I feel like you have to do mental gymnastics for it to kind of make sense. You see Sam kill Peter, so therefore he should have been saved, right? And Molly survived the bridge collapse. We were given no reason to think she didn't, so she should have been saved too, right? Really, the only thing I can think of is you see Sam trying to save Molly the entire film and try to make sure that she's okay no matter what, whether it be in the premonition or after the premonition or saving her from Peter. He's always trying to make sure that she's okay, but eventually this led to him being the reason that she ultimately dies is my take on it, because the moment that all those other people got off the bridge that were supposed to die but didn't, with Molly, who was supposed to live the entire time, she kind of got a target in her back. She never would have ended up in the restaurant with Peter if they hadn't have gotten off the bridge. And because she was in that restaurant, Peter almost killed her and was supposed to have killed her, but then Sam ended up intervening and saving her, which put her on death's list. That is the only thing that I can think of to make sense. I don't know if that's too headcanon-y for you guys, but like that's kind of like what I think. And part of the reason I think that is because you see a similar thing in Final Destination 2 with the farmer's kid. He never would have been put on death's list at all if our pile-up survivors didn't end up at the farm. There would have been no news van there to almost hit him and for Rory to save him. So that's the only thing that I can think of, but it's not very well choreographed in this film, if that is the case, which it might seem like a nitpick, but it is something that kind of bothers me about this movie. Another thing too that I want to throw out there with this film is part of the reason that it lacks for me is it feels like it takes way too long for them to get to the point of exactly what's going on. I remember looking at the runtime for the movie, and it isn't until you get to about the hour marker that you realize, or that our characters realize, that death is going after them in the order that they were supposed to die in the vision. And that's something that we usually find out within, I would say, usually the first 30 or so minutes of the movie. So the fact that we're an hour into the movie and we're discovering this thing with our characters, and then we only have half an hour left to wrap it up, especially when you're already 5 movies deep into this franchise, you need to bring stuff up like that sooner so your movie is more fast-paced. That could be a hot take for me. That might be something that doesn't bother other people, but for me, I think that it could have been done way better, and I think it would have helped with the tension way more, and made it too where it didn't feel like we were just moving on to the next set piece, next set piece, next set piece, being the deaths are the set pieces. That goes without saying. Overall, I would say that I enjoyed this movie a lot more than the previous installment. It doesn't anger me, but there is many points in it where it does bore me, which in some aspects I do find to be worse in a movie. Really, the main thing that saves the day to me is a couple of the deaths I think are cool. The bridge scene is iconic, and that twist ending, though, like I said, there are mental gymnastics with it, it is still a really fun ending to see, and I'm glad that they did do it overall. But still, this movie is a little lackluster for me. But ignoring my opinions on it entirely, like, this ended up making a shit pile of money in the box office and ended up becoming the second highest grossing Final Destination movie, right behind the previous installment. So audiences liked it. And two, like, critics weren't the nicest to this film either. They're never nice to any of these movies, let alone any horror franchise, really. But critics did say that they thought that the bridge scene was very brilliantly done, and they also talked about how a lot of the kills in it were a lot better than the previous installment, and that the 3D effects were used to better effect in this film. And I do have to agree with that. I think the 3D in this was used a lot better, and it doesn't take away from the movie at all. It doesn't pull you out of the movie more often than not. It's not like the previous installment where the whole gimmick was 3D to cover up the fact they didn't have a story. This one is not that, so I will give them that credit entirely. So that about wraps up this video. As you've heard me mention throughout this entire series, the new Final Destination Bloodlines is coming out here soon. You also saw the growth of my god-awful decisions with my hair throughout this video. I need to get it cut so bad. So I guess this is a full circle moment, going from the shaggy mop mess that I had back to this for now. If you guys want to see more content like this in the future, I try to post weekly. I cover anything and everything horror on this channel. And if you like the video, give it a like. If you have thoughts about the franchise, comment down below. I would love to hear what you guys are thinking. I'd love to have a conversation with you guys. And I hope that you're all just as excited for Final Destination Bloodlines as I am. But anyways, This has been Justice, and I hope to catch you guys on the next one. Take care.